Okay, let's do it. I know, right? Okay, let's start with meeting attendance. I'll start with Denver Gibbs. Here.
Here.
Julia Flaherty.
Here.
Shelley North.
Here.
David Cunningham.
Here.
Peter Herbst.
Here.
Justine Wong.
Here.
Liz Page.
Here.
Raina Rubin, not here. And Joe Reynolds, not here.
Madam Chair,
Oh.
I anticipate both of them coming, maybe they're just running late, we'll just keep track of
Okay. And Erin Joyce is out.
Erin Joyce is absent this evening, correct?
Okay, so as you may have noticed, we have a new member. Denver is the president and CEO of Gibbs Software Solution in Braintree. He started the company in 2014. He has been in Braintree from New York since 2009, so we're thrilled that you joined us.
Thank you.
Okay. And are there any staff announcements?
If I may, very quickly through the chair, I just want to bring everyone's attention. We prepared a fairly lengthy packet this evening. Not sure what folks would bring with them and not bring with them. I just want to note everyone's attention to the schedule. There have been some revisions to the schedule. The technical working sessions have been pushed back to April 10th and April 13th. Those lists have been finalized and are in the packet. We can talk about that a little further along in the agenda. But most importantly, there was a meeting on April 27th, which is no longer going to be held. So any questions about the schedule, feel free to reach out directly, but I wanted to make sure everyone had that in a hard copy as well. And that's it from the staff. Thank you, Madam Chair.
And do we have a motion to approve the minutes of November 28th?
So moved.
Do we have a second? Second, okay. The minutes are approved.
We need to vote on them.
Oh, sorry, okay. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Aye, okay. Any opposed? No, okay, and it passes. Okay. And then, are there any nominations for vice chair?
Madam Chair,
Liz Page?
I would like to nominate Justine Huang for the position of Vice Chair. And if you give me 1 second, I prepared something to say. I would like to nominate Justine Huang to the position of Vice Chair. We have had the pleasure of serving with Justine on the Master Plan Steering Committee, and Justine is also a member of the Charter Review Committee. I would also like to mention that Justine organized the Braintree's first Lunar New Year celebration, and from this wonderful event, her group was able to donate $1,800 to the Senior Center and also a $1,500 donation to the Marge Crispin Food Pantry. These donations are an expression of support for our community, and I hope you will join me and support Justine's nomination.
Okay, any other nominations?
My name is Julia Flaherty, and I would like to nominate Denver Gibbs. For what it is worth, I think it is very wise for us to have a balance between resident and representative of the business community in Braintree, and I think Denver is a great fit for that.
Okay, any other nominations? Okay, so Justine Wong, all in favor, say...
Excuse me. Second motion, second for these nominations.
Oh, do we need a second for these nominations?
Exactly how the script is.
Okay, I Googled it, so I'm following my Google script. I don't, is it in here?
It's in the packet.
Okay.
In the
all right.
packet, yep.
Oh, thank you. Okay, so,
Yeah, she'll have to go back to each one and ask for a second.
okay, so. Okay, so Liz, if you could redo your nomination. You don't have to
Okay.
read, but just,
I would like to nominate Justine Huang to the position of vice chair, please.
okay, and is there a second? I'll second. Can I second?
You can step down a second.
I'll step down and second. Okay. And are there any other nominations?
My name is Julia Flaherty, and I would like to nominate Denver Gibbs for the position of vice chair.
Okay, and do we have a second?
Second.
Okay. All right, so, okay, it doesn't really say that, but, okay. Justine, do you consent to be nominated?
Yes, I do.
And Denver, do you consent to be
Yes.
nominated? Okay, so, so for the nomination of Justine Wong, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, so 3. And for the nomination of Denver Gibbs, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, and 1, 2, 3. Okay, so Denver, you are the new vice chair, so you're in the perfect spot. You don't even have to move. Okay, so next on the agenda, I'm going to turn it over to the strategies discussion. I'll turn it over to Jen.
Great, thank you so much. Glad to see you all. I know we were trying to get together in February and it didn't work out, but I'm glad to see you all now, and I'm also glad it wasn't a snowstorm tonight, so I was getting worried about that. You can see that we have our whole team here, and so this is a very important night for the whole process, really, and I'm going to talk a little bit overarching about what we're doing tonight and why we have our whole team here and what will happen next. And then my team will actually be going through all the ideas that we put out to you a few weeks ago now, and it'll be a Q&A session, essentially. So we have this, of course you already know this, but just to remind everybody and anyone watching, we have this draft overall vision statement, and then there are 5 core themes. And each of those core themes has a series of goals. And so what our team has done is come up with, we did a group work session back, I think it was towards the end of January. We all got together and really started to brainstorm what are some best planning practices that we could suggest as ideas for the town to consider that would address every single goal you have in there. So we actually did look at every single goal for all of the core themes and came up with options and ideas for you to consider. And so where we are right now is at the top of this big filter that I put on the screen. So we have lots of ideas. And so that's where we want to get you started into phase 3. We have no expectation that by the time you get through this process to the bottom, where you have a short list of strategies, we have no expectation that you will have the same list. You will probably have things that you add, things that you change, and things that you remove. And that's a normal part of the process. That's basically how it's designed. So we start out with lots of options, lots of ideas, and then we go through this series of essentially filtering mechanisms, if you want to look at it that way, where first you have the technical working sessions digging into a subset of the longer list. And I'm going to talk about, well, how do you figure out what that subset is? Then you have the road shows that you all will do. You'll all go out to as many boards and commissions and organizations as you can over the next few months, sharing these ideas, especially the ones that relate to that particular board's interest. And you'll ask them what they think of the ideas, if they have any other ideas. And of course, members of the public will be encouraged to participate as well during those board and committee and organization get-togethers where you go through this list. And then you have the department manager's working session, and there we're really trying to figure out what's really feasible here in terms of the capacity that you have? Are there some capacity gaps? Are there funding, perhaps sources that you may know about? Or do you have any other concerns? Are there any synergies by working together? And that's happening at the department manager's working session. And then it all comes back to you in the end. And you decide, all right, based on everything we've heard to date, what makes sense in terms of this short list that we want to see in this master plan? And all of this, I call it filtering, will happen where we'll check in with you between these different filtering events that are happening, report back to you on this is what we learned, this is what we heard. They talked about pros about these ideas, and they talked about cons or concerns, and we'll report back to you, and you all decide, essentially, what should stay, what should go, what should be added, what should be changed. So at each of these, you could also call them checkpoints. We're learning something, and we're checking in, and then we learn something else and we check in. And so by the end of it, you have, I call it a short list, because we don't want to give you so many strategies that there's no possible way you could work to achieve them. So let me just pause there before I get to a little bit more about what the working sessions and what we're doing tonight. Does anybody have a question just on this concept of starting with a lot of ideas? You may add some tonight. The list may get bigger tonight, but it's not going to shrink. And as you go through this process over the next number of months, the list will likely shrink and change. Any questions about that? Julia, may I recognize Julia?
Yes, Julia?
So I'm just wondering, how many technical working sessions are there anticipated to be? Just one, or is it kind of going to be something that we feel our way through as we tackle the subject at hand?
Yeah, so there'll be one for each of the 5 core themes. And we'll have, they'll be grouped into 2 days, but there will be one separate working session on each core theme. And so each group that participates in those will focus on that core theme.
Right, so for example, the steering committee on traffic and transportation would meet once,
Correct.
and then separately, other committees would meet once.
Correct.
Okay, can you help me understand, there are small committees that are made up of members of the Master Plan Steering Committee that are different from these technical working sessions, and I'm not 100% clear on how their feedback gets filtered into this process.
Okay, I think I know what you mean, and tell me, you stop me if you think I'm misunderstanding you. So we've asked 4 members of the committee to volunteer to come to each of these. So some of you will need to come to more than one because we don't have enough people to only have you go to one. So you've signed up, I think, to go and facilitate. And so at each of these technical working sessions, we'll have 4 of you there, and we're going to break the larger group of 16 people into 4 groups so that each member of the master plan committee will facilitate a small group at that working session.
I see.
And then the roadshow is different, though. The roadshow is you all individually going out to as many committees and boards and organizations as you're able to, including ones that you may already sit on, to talk about the different strategies that might concern that particular board.
Okay, and will the technical working groups determine which of the sitting boards they would like to appear before? Or do you already have a list of that?
We already have a list, and I think Melissa has put something together already. Is that right?
Yes, if I may, through the chair, we did. We need to, I was just writing a note to Connor saying we need to look at the dates because we had scheduled that to happen during the old window, which was most of April into May, and the schedule's been kicked back a little bit. So we will update that. We have a full list of Board of Assessors, Board of Health, Historic, Commission on Disabilities, CPC, Conservation, Planning Board, Recreation Advisory Committee, School Building Committee, School Committee, Tri-Town Water Commissioners, Town Council, and Zoning Board of Appeals.
Okay, and some of those bodies are subject to open meeting law. Are all of the appearances before these boards intended to be also open to the public?
Correct.
Okay.
And we also wanted to encourage, it's up to the board or commission if they would agree to this, but we talked last time, I think maybe it was Liz's idea, which I thought was a very good idea, to just encourage those boards and commissions to open up for any public comment.
Okay. And I would like to understand, as we go into the technical working sessions, the extent to which, since those will be open
Yes.
meetings, will the public be folded into those groups that we divide into, or will they be, or not?
Yeah, the public would be welcome to observe, and of course, they can always make comments by email or in writing, but we're not opening those up for public comment.
Okay. Thank you. I wanted to be very clear on that, so I understand. That's all. Thanks.
Great. And we also want you to know that, I'm sorry, Melissa, tell me if I'm wrong about this. They're not going to be filmed anymore, is that correct?
That's correct. I had reached out to Wes Ray, and he said that that type of format isn't really good for taping, and that he would be willing to do something similar to what we did with the community forum, and have like a one-on-one, maybe with the chair, an interview to kind of do a takeaway if we wanted to. But they will not be taped by BCAM. And what we will probably do is designate one of the master plan steering committee members that's sitting in on these, or maybe the consultants, to just take some notes, and we can have those just as kind of like meeting notes for each of those sessions.
Liz?
Ask Jen Goldson, regarding the community input at the technical working groups, you said that they're allowed to be there, but they're not able to participate in speaking. And I'm wondering what the rationale is when the whole process is supposed to be open to the public. And then you also made a comment that they can submit comments in writing. So would that be submitting the comments prior to the meeting or after?
Anytime. Yeah,
Prior to the meeting?
anytime.
Anytime.
Even
So-
now, they can submit comments at any time through the process.
Right, but if we're talking about the actual technical working groups and they're observing it, and you said, but they're not able to verbally participate in that, which I don't quite understand what the difference is between that.
I can explain, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. So typically what we do is we do focus groups in other communities that are actually not public meetings. We just invite not a quorum, similar to the way we did it in the first phase of your master plan, where we have a very small group of, it's typically boards, some board members, department head members, and we just ask them to give us information, like, what do you think of these strategies? Are there any technical things we should be thinking about here? What are the pros and cons? But we know that Braintree is very admirably interested in having a very transparent process. So instead, what we proposed is that these be open to the public so that people can actually hear what people are saying about the pros and cons. And so we have complete transparency. The idea of these, though, is not to gain public input at the technical working session. It's really to try to understand from folks that really work on these issues, either as part of being on a board or commission or perhaps professionally, what pros and cons they really see. Folks that, deal with zoning or deal with these financial, mechanisms, and really try to understand what are some of the pros and cons here from a technical aspect. But the road shows, which will be happening essentially at the same time and longer, they'll happen for, I have to look at my schedule, but 6 to 8 weeks, I think we have them going on, so you can all go out. Those are all meant not just to talk with the boards and commissions, but to ask for public feedback.
Okay.
And it gives like a smaller subset of the, the strategies. For example, when you go to the planning board, you'll mostly want to talk about zoning. When you go to the Commission on Disabilities, you probably will be talking about a bunch of other things, including accessibility of sidewalks and all sorts of things. When you go to, a neighborhood group, for example, you can also do these in neighborhood groups or other organizations that are not official town municipal government entities. You'll talk about perhaps what's affecting their own neighborhood and talk about a subset. And so it's also a nice way to give the information in bite-sized pieces by asking folks to come out to the committees and boards of the subjects that they're the most interested in. If they really want to come out to everything, they're certainly welcome to. But that way, there's going to be, planning board's going to focus on zoning. And if you really want to talk about zoning, you should come to the planning board and give your feedback there.
Okay, and on that same note, if members of the public are in attendance and they have comments or input that they want to make to the planning board regarding their feedback, how do they do that?
So I liked your suggestion at our I think it was our January meeting. The master plan steering committee doesn't have authority to tell the other boards and commissions how to run their meeting. However, you can make, maybe through the chair's invitation, encourage them to
Okay.
take public comment.
Okay,
And hopefully they would all agree to do that as part of the process.
very good, thank you.
And we haven't actually talked about the department manager's working session being open to the public, but, we're certainly open to that as well. That would be another situation where the members of the public would come and observe, but it's really for the department managers to really dig into what's feasible here and what capacity concerns they have. But
Okay.
something I haven't talked about with anyone, but on our end, we'd be happy to do that.
Okay, thank you.
Julia?
Thank you. So when we do these, road shows, so to speak, and we approach a body that is kind of specialized in nature, like, for example, Sustainable Braintree, would we present to them all the strategies for all the areas, or just the one that we think is most applicable to their specialty?
So what we suggest is that you give them the full list, which will be on the website. It'll be, public information. It already is public information. Give them the full list of ideas under consideration, but focus your presentation on a subset that you predetermined they'll be most interested in. And then, of course, if they want to talk about others, I think you could be open to do that during the meeting. Does that make sense? So,
Yes.
yeah.
I have a suggestion. If we could add the senior center to that, and maybe Kay went with me last time when we went to talk to the seniors about what they're looking for. I think it might be, they don't always come out to these meetings, but they congregate at the senior center, and they have a lot of great ideas. So I'm happy to do that one. Maybe you'll do that one with me.
If I may clarify through the chair, so we started, it was they're basically town-appointed regulatory boards, and now I'm listening to Member Flaherty saying Sustainable Braintree and now the Senior Center. So are we going to branch out from what we originally had discussed?
Well, Jen had mentioned other groups, and I thought that's what you meant.
Yeah, I mean, I hope I didn't mess anything up for you, Melissa.
No,
But
they might not have regularly scheduled meetings. I just
Right.
want to have an understanding. If we're interested, I'll start to reach out to them.
Yeah, I mean, I would think the broader you can of any groups that are interested, even neighborhood groups or other entities, if they're interested, and if enough of you are willing to go out to them, that's the other thing. These are
Of course.
meetings that you would hold.
Yep, absolutely. Raina?
I'm wrong. I thought those non-irregular or official groups would be part of the roadshow that we would reach out to and go back to.
Yeah, part of the roadshow.
Yeah.
That's correct. The
That's what
official,
we're talking about, the
yeah, that's
roadshow.
what we're talking about.
The special, I think so too, yeah.
Madam Chair, can you see if there's any other groups that the board's interested in, so we can make sure that we include them?
Does anyone else have any other suggestions of boards that they would like to go to, or committees or groups? Liz?
Do it with the North Braintree Civic Association.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else? Dave?
Was hoping that maybe we could address how we go about appearing before these groups, going through the list of recommendations. It's very clear that the people who made the recommendations do that for a living. I can go through half of it and not be able to comprehend the jargon or the acronyms, I could not adequately conduct a meeting and answer anybody's question on some of these subjects. And I doubt anybody else on this committee could do the same.
Yeah, I'm happy to address that. So that's a great segue to what we're doing tonight, but there's two parts to my answer, and I see Joseph Reynolds also has his hand up. Did you want to speak first?
Just through the chair, just on the topic we were talking about is adding groups. I'd like to add the Braintree Chamber of Commerce.
And, okay, if you could add that.
Great. So tonight, I hope we get to this soon, because I knew we wanted to talk about process, but we do have a lot to do tonight as well. What we're all here really is to try to help everyone understand some of that. Sometimes we can't get away completely from jargon in terms of these really technical ideas that we're offering you, but this is a group of experts that we've gathered around us so that we can answer any questions that you have tonight. We want you to walk out of this meeting having clarity about what these ideas are. You may not be sure if you like it or not yet, and that's fine, but we want you to understand what these ideas are. So that's part of my answer. But the second piece is we're going to be providing you with a PowerPoint that will have modules. We call them modules, but they're basically, we'll group the strategies by the core themes. But we can also give you some other more specialized modules, like we can pull out anything that's related to zoning, which isn't just in one of the core themes, it's in many different core themes. We can give you anything that's related to I don't know, I'm just making things up right now. We can categorize them in different ways other than the core themes, so that when you go to whichever group you're thinking of, you pull out the module or modules that you think they would be the most interested in given their mission and location, if it's a particular neighborhood, and you just present on that. And what I would suggest, and I'm happy to, talk with you folks one-on-one if you have specific questions as you're getting ready to present. You're going to whatever committee and you want to do this first module and you don't know what this one particular thing means. You can always, I know that we've talked about this before, and I hope that it's okay, but I'm happy to explain things one-on-one as well to folks if you just want some extra support around what does this mean. I'm presenting tomorrow night, and I'm a little bit, unsure about what the nuances here are. We also tried to give you links to other resources throughout and examples, and if you like that, perhaps there are some that you want some more help with, and we're happy to, if it exists, we're happy to try to find you some more resources and examples. If there's a few particular ones that we didn't provide that for that you think would be helpful. Does that feel more comfortable? Some extent?
I'll let you know.
Okay.
Okay, let's keep going.
All right, great. So this is just showing you what you already have. I think you already got all this by email, and I'm assuming it was also in your packet, but this was just the list of ideas that we all came up with, and it's categorized by those core themes, and that's what we want to talk about tonight. And I just want to be very clear, as we said in the handout, these are not recommendations. We're not recommending anything to you. All we're telling you is we think this list of options are at least worth considering and worth thinking about pros and cons, because we believe they will help you address the goals in your vision. Now, there could be ideas that we didn't think of, and we want to talk about if there's anything else you didn't see in there that you are like, why didn't you put this thing? It's probably just because we didn't think of it. But what we want to do tonight is add things if you think of more things. And I want just a reminder, I've said this before, this is an iterative process, so at the end of phase 3, when we come up with that short list of strategies, we'll go back to the vision and goals, and we may need to tweak them, because it could be that some of the ideas that we tried to work on for a particular goal, maybe none of them were feasible, and maybe that becomes less of a priority, and then we go back and we change that goal. Maybe we won't, but that's something that is a possibility, and when I say we, I really mean you. But the idea is that this is all part of the process. We do our best we can with figuring out what strategies address the vision and goals, and then at the end of phase 3, we want you to go back to that vision and goals and think, does anything need to change now to reflect where we're ending up with the strategies? Does that make sense?
Does.
All right. And so what are we doing tonight? Really, we're learning tonight. We've made the whole team available to answer questions so that you more fully understand the different options that we've put in this handout. And then we're also adding suggestions. It could be that, like I said, you think of something that we didn't think of, or perhaps you want an alternative suggestion. Maybe we said something and you feel like, I kind of like some of that, but not the whole thing. Can we add a strategy that focuses it in on this one aspect? And so that becomes a separate strategy then for this phase. And so just to reiterate, we're not really formulating opinions about these yet, because you don't have all the information yet. This whole process is meant to get you the information. All right, so after this meeting, we're going to send out that survey to all of you, and we're going to make each individual's results available on the website. So it will have your name, Shelley North, answered the question in this way. Now, I just want to be very clear about this. This will not be an anonymous survey. And the reason is for the reasons of transparency that we keep talking about. We'd love to, have a meeting where we actually come up with the list that we're giving to the technical working sessions tonight, but we don't want to keep you here till midnight again. So that's why we decided, let's do this survey. It's not to be making decisions behind closed doors, though, and so that's why we will put your individual responses. And so you may wonder, well, what is in this survey? So the point of the survey is to figure out which are the up to 10 ideas that you think it would be helpful to have the technical working groups dig into deeper. And you may want to go about this in many different ways. The way I would do it is consider which ideas are the most complex or the most likely to have unintended consequences or the most impactful or consequential or the most controversial. So if it's a no-brainer, I wouldn't bother giving it to the working session. But if it's something that you're like, oh, geez, I'm not sure about this one, it seems pretty complicated and I can see it going awry, I want the working session to really dig into the pros and cons of this so that I can better understand it. And now the working sessions are not making any decisions for you. They're simply vetting them in a very deep way and giving you more information of the pros and cons that they see and things that you should be thinking about. Does that make sense the way I'm describing this? Okay. Any questions about what's happening tonight or why we're doing this survey? I didn't really explain the survey very well, did I? The survey is going to give you this list of all the strategies plus any that you add tonight. And it's going to ask you to choose the 10 that you think, for each of the core themes, warrant deeper discussion at the technical working session. But again, you're not eliminating anything. They're all still here. And then we're going to we're going to look at all of your scores and figure out where the consensus, where the highest marked ideas are for discussion and pick those 10. David has his hands up, Chair Watson.
Oh, sorry, David.
In the process of arriving at the 10, are we going to be prioritizing them 1 through 10, or
No.
just creating 1 through 10?
Just 1 through 10. And the only reason we're doing 10 is because we've done this before where we've given them like 20 or 18, and it's very difficult for them to get through in 2.5 hours working session. So we're trying to give them a manageable amount. And a lot of them, in the past at least, we have seen a lot of the ideas are like, well, yeah, that's kind of a no-brainer, but they talk about it anyway because it's on the list. So we want to give them the ones that are really the most, probably the ones you're going to pick are the most controversial or the most complex. Especially the ones you don't understand well. Those would be really good ones to pick. All right. All right, that's the whole thing. And so I know I took a lot of time laying that out, but I think it's just really important to lay out the process and why we're doing this. And so what I do have the vision handy in case we want to refer to it. But what we're going to do now is really just go each core theme. We're going to have a member of our team give just a very brief overview of what are these strategy ideas? We're not going to go through every one of them. We're just going to give you the flavor of how did we come up with these ideas? What is the direction we're trying to go in here? And then we're going to open it up for Q&A. And we're going to answer your questions. And it's really questions of clarifications to make sure that when you leave this room, you have a better understanding of these ideas than when you walked in. And then if you want to add anything, that would be a good time to just say, hey, I want to add this. You don't really have to even talk about that. We'll just add it to the survey that we send out to you. So you're not making any decisions tonight. You're not trying to reach consensus or agree on anything. If you have an idea, we'll add it. But really, it's about understanding these and picking everybody's brain here. Is that fair? Make sense? I see Liz has her hand up. Chair Waterland?
Liz has a question. Liz?
Will we be removing any or modifying any?
We don't suggest that you remove or modify, but if you want to add alternative ones, like maybe you like something about one of them but not everything, then just add the way you want it to be worded, and that'll just be an additional one.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so are we clear about the process before we start to dig in? And is everybody in agreement that we can proceed this way?
So at the end of each core theme, after there's discussion, so after the presentation, are we going to separate by core theme, and then we could go around the room if people have additions or any
Yes.
concerns with what's written?
Exactly. We'll do a very, very
All right.
brief
Per
per
theme?
core theme.
All right, okay.
Yep, exactly. And then we'll be taking notes on your additions, and so you'll see them come into the survey when we send it out. It'll either be tomorrow or, what's today, Monday? Wednesday? It'll be Wednesday that we send it out. Okay. You like how I'm telling you?
And when is the survey due?
I don't remember.
Excuse me, I think we'd like to have it back by Monday, but we'll get it out to you maybe late Wednesday. We
Okay,
have a few other things that we're working on, but I think late Wednesday, and if we could get it back before Monday, that would be great.
okay. Very good.
All right, so let's go through the first core theme here is conservation, preservation, and sustainability. And Beverly's just going to give you a very brief overview, and then we can do the Q&A and any ideas you want to add.
So, thank you. Again, good evening, Madam Chair and committee members. Core theme number 1 focuses on conservation, natural resource protection, and preservation, and sustainability. Several strategies were informed by the 2018 Open Space and Recreation Plan, which, as you know, is due for an update, but was still valuable in understanding existing conditions and goals of the community. Attention was paid to all the goals, with particular attention to protecting existing open space and increasing open space. Examples would be identifying locations for land acquisition, increase conservation land area, or acquiring vacant and underutilized parcels and used for placemaking to establish pocket parks throughout Braintree. Recreation strategies were introduced also, ideas focused on adding amenities and improvements to existing facilities. Examples would be invest in added amenities and recreation opportunities at existing open spaces such as the Braintree Dam, Braintree Town Forest, and Sunset Lake. Identify a location for a municipal dog park, ideally within east or north Braintree to complement the open space goals, and conduct and I know I'm not going to say this right. Is it Monaquit River? Monaquit River Master Planning Process, determine future use of shorelands for outdoor recreation and gathering spaces. Other strategies focus on implementation and support for carbon reduction goals, energy efficiency, and sustainable development, particularly on the municipal side. Solar canopies, examples would be recommendations for solar canopies in municipal parking lots, converting Beld into generating a cogeneration plant as part of Beld, establishing a solid waste advisory committee, investing in green infrastructure, and fleet conversion to electric vehicles. Other strategies build on increasing awareness, support, and partnerships for these goals related to sustainability. Identify locations, supplant native pollination gardens and microforests around town, facilitate and adopt an island program, and curbside composting. These are all recommendations to engage the community in private partnerships and to increase awareness within the community. And last but not least, there were goals related to historic preservation and appreciation of the town's historic and cultural resources, including working with the Braintree Local Cultural Council to establish a list of local priorities for grants and grant application, develop an arts and culture brochure and a landing page on the town website, and considering amending the demolition delay ordinance to extend the delay period from 4 months to 24 months. So these are just a sampling within those categories of some of the recommendations that we've identified, or some of the strategy ideas, I should say, that we have identified for your consideration. So I'd be glad to answer any questions.
So if we just want to go around, and we could start with Peter, if there's any, you don't have to like go through everything you like or if you're okay with, but if there's something you want to add or something you want to modify, bring it forward.
And also, can I just say,
Core theme 1.
and questions, like really, we're here to answer questions to try to get more clarity if there's something that you want more information about.
Peter.
Just from the feedback in our public hearing, I think in the fall, one of the components is not just protecting and restoring, but also enhancing public access to some of these resources that already are there, but some don't even have adequate parking to access them.
Can I just ask a question? So are you adding that as a strategy?
Yeah, we're
okay,
adding that.
all right.
Yep.
So, okay. Dave, do you have something you want to add to core theme 1?
Not add, but seek information on some of the items that are listed in core theme 1.
Which one? Sorry.
I didn't hear.
You can ask us, I think, that's fine, yeah.
Okay. Well, for instance, at Q, right below it, it has an A, and it makes reference to the Redmond zoning code. I have no idea what that means.
We're not that far down yet. Remember Cunningham's? We're in core theme 1, right?
That's core theme 1.
That's part of 1.
That's part of
I
1.
think it's a link, Dave.
Yeah.
Oh, my bad.
It's actually a link to the, if you click on it online, you'll come to the actual, that document.
Okay, so
Anything underlined.
would that also be true with respect to the A that's in, with M, making reference to South Hadley?
Yes. Anything that's underlined and in a different color, correct me if I'm wrong, Beverly, because I looked through all these links, is that, okay.
Most of them are links that kind of provide sometimes they're example ordinances or example programs at other jurisdictions. Sometimes they're guiding documents that might be resources available online. So they're just a variety of things that might provide some options or explanation for that particular strategy idea.
Okay, thank you.
Shelley?
I liked what Peter said about the parking. I think we also mentioned signage, so if that could be entered. I mean, there are a lot of places around the town, but people just don't know because there's not signage to it. I do have a question on R. I don't know what a demolition delay ordinance means in this reference.
Sure. So it essentially is applying to historic resources. Many towns have this, and Braintree, I think, has one, but it's just shorter than what we're recommending. And what it does is if a historic resource is over a certain age, let's say, even if it's not in a local district or protected in any other way, and someone goes to apply for demolition to, build something up else or clear it for parking, they would need to get, they would basically need to, if it triggered this delay because the resource was of a certain age, they would need to get reviewed by the Historic Commission to see if the resource is significant enough to impose a delay, meaning the property owner would not be able to demolish that building for a certain period of time. Currently, Braintree's demolition delay ordinance only gives a delay of 4 months, which is very short. That's like the blink of an eye for someone looking to develop. And you may say, that's great, that's pro-development, and it is. But if you're looking to preserve historic resources, then we would recommend extending that so that it's more powerful, so that you can delay potentially 2 years. That's significant. Some delay a year. You can do anything in between. But if you're delaying by 2 years, you have a lot of negotiating power. You could potentially get another use in that building to preserve it. You could maybe initiate some kind of a sale, or maybe use CPA funds to buy it if it's that significant. Or perhaps you could negotiate moving the building to clear the way for use of that property for something else, but maybe you move the building. I'm not saying any of these things are easier, but when you only have 4 months, you really have very little power to preserve that historic resource.
So then that will go to my second question. So this is in the sustainability, right? So, but then we have a separate section about, or is this in the historic sustainability?
So the way we wrote the vision, it kind of mixed.
Kind of mixed it in?
Yeah, it
Okay.
kind of mixed things in.
All right.
And if there are more appropriate places to put things later, we can always sort through it again.
Okay,
Yeah.
sounds good.
Julia? Thank you. I have one suggestion, and that is, and maybe this is not the right section for it, and if that's the case, then that's fine. But there's a mention here about considering increasing the Community Preservation Act surcharge. And I think that one of the things that we could benefit with our community preservation program is kind of its own like master plan, so to speak, like a prioritized set of goals that can be achieved with community preservation funding. That's not in place right now, and I think that we might, I think it would be an improvement if we had it.
So add that, yeah.
Yes.
Thank you. Oh, Beverly just suggested that everything we're adding, we're going to read it at the end of this core theme to just make sure we got everybody's in there.
Are you done? That's what I have. Okay, Denver?
I only have one quick question. So I see Braintree Community Arts Center. Does it include music with the arts?
I'm not sure actually what is included. Do you know, Melissa?
If I may, through the chair, I don't believe they have music. I know that they have different instruction classes and art and things. My understanding is Heidi Hurley, I think she used to be in art with the high school. I believe that she runs it now. And I'm not 100% sure, but I'm almost positive it doesn't include any music.
So
We can double check. We can see if they're on the, I don't even know if they're on the website, to be honest.
could we possibly include music, looking into it?
So add a music program.
Music program, yeah. That's it.
I have a question about Q. So identify density considerations, relief for projects that propose green building standards. So can you clarify, what does that mean? What percentage of the project has green building? What does that, can you define that clear for me? And can we define it here? Because it's that, I mean, if you add an electric stove, is that, all set? Green?
So I had a different cue, so I just want to double check. This is actually one that is similar to a couple of others in the document. The idea is that you can offer density sort of incentives. So sometimes jurisdictions have inclusionary zoning, and they essentially require affordable housing, but sometimes they can use their density to essentially incentivize other types of public amenities. They can use it to incentivize green building structures, for example. They can use it to incentivize additional or even affordable housing. And in this case, I think the idea is that it can be used to incentivize public amenities, for example, connections and pedestrian connections and open space. So essentially, using sort of dimensional and any kind of different kinds of relief incentives to get developers to give you something for it that the community needs or a public benefit that the community might want to realize.
But this says green building standards.
So in this particular case, there would be if they did a green building, for example, they might get a special sort of dimensional relief or something else that they might get for the green building standard.
And can we define that?
So I think, as I had mentioned, I think it was brought up about the Redmond zoning code. It can be, for example, an improved, floor to area ratio. It can be a little bit higher of a building. It can be a little bit.
I actually don't mean that piece of it. I mean the piece of what's the requirement for the green piece. Like,
I understand.
So is it like recyclable materials? It's certain,
we can
PCR percentage. What does that? Can we define that?
We could definitely introduce some more specific language, and I can work on that. When I was working with green building standard, or using LEED certification, there's a whole host of new green building standards that have been introduced that are either go beyond LEED or are different than LEED. And so I've always what I've heard from folks who are implementing programs where they were trying to incentivize LEED standards was that they said LEED's outdated. We have so many other things that we'd like to incentivize. So what we can do is see if we can add some more clarification about what those green building standards are.
Yeah, and on the other side, what does density considerations mean? That seems very broad.
It could be more than density. It could be other types of dimensional type of relief, yeah.
Yeah, and if I could just say, if you like this idea in general, then really fleshing that out when you go to implement it down the road. So if you want to require passive house, which is a very high, kind of one of the highest categories of green building, it's up to the town when they go to adopt these things to basically figure out how you want to interpret that. And then what the level of density is would also be up to all of you. I mean, it would be up to the town.
Not really us, but yeah.
Yeah, not all of you, but up to the town, yeah.
Okay,
So we
all right.
often don't get very specific in the recommendations because you have to go through a whole public process to really put the details on those.
Okay, all right. I just thought, because we define it in my line of work, we have specific definitions and like certain percentages, and I just would like to see that, right? Because to me, it's like, you can say I'm green because I, add electric stoves, right? So.
Yeah, I mean, I would suggest, and I see Mr. Reynolds has his hand up, I would suggest if, you wanted to make sure to be clear in this is almost a directive to your town for the future. You could say something like, the highest green standards, feasible at, if you adopt this in 5 years, things will change. Passive house may not any longer be something that is desirable.
Okay, thank you. All right, your turn.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This might be helpful just to add to that conversation in your question. I know that there are building codes out there that are very specific to promoting more efficient energy use, lower energy uses for various buildings, homes, et cetera, and they're more of a building code. I think that is probably one of the areas that is of interest here. I know that the town of Braintree has implemented some of these building, and the term escapes me.
Stretch energy
Stretch
code.
energy code.
I'm sorry?
The stretch energy code.
Thank you very much. That's the term. So I think that's part of the conversation as well. I thought maybe that might be a helpful consideration for you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Thank you. Go. It's your turn.
It's my turn now. I'm on. Okay. I'd like to see create a public user option for non-potable water distribution source. This is, with water actually being the new gold in some cases. Water conservation is very important. Water retention, potable water retention is very important, how we preserve that. And this could be a very cost-prohibitive initiative at some point, but I think it is very worthwhile for us to have a discussion, anyways, on how we might be able to use non-potable water in our own homes, in industry, in business, municipalities, etc. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Raina?
I don't have any additions or questions at this time.
Liz?
Okay, back to item G, explore municipal fleet conversion to electric and/or hybrid as existing vehicles come offline per Braintree's 2020 energy reduction plan, which is obviously a great idea, but I think it would be good if we could add in the phrase "when economically feasible," because I think the cost to do this all at once might be overwhelming. And the other item I would like to add in there, that in order to do so safely, I think we should have, at the same time, new equipment available for the Braintree Fire Department to be able to put out fires that are generated by electric vehicles, because they're very difficult. And that's it.
Okay.
you.
Justine?
Eight, we're talking about 2018 Open Space Recreation Plan. Want something to including the extension of that plan, because that's a 7 years plan, and we are about 5, we only have 3 more years, and our master plan is 10-year plans. So somewhere there that we have a review the extension of the recreation plan. And the second one is B, where from our community comment, we're trying to, from our last vision strategy, we're trying to remove a particular location out of our statement. And so example here, you have Braintree Dams and you have Sunset Lake. So I'm not sure, is it for example, for a working group, we want to keep it in the strategy perspective. I would like to change that, make a recommendation to change the review existing open space outlined in the 2018 open space plan, and prioritize based on the list that we have in 2018, which is in the page 57, had a list of the open space, and we would like to prioritize it based on residents' accessibility prefers. So example, you have an open space that nobody can access to, what's good about it? So that's where we like to change it to prioritize based on the open space opportunity that we have identified. And also is adding protecting nature habitats, include wildlife, migratories. Example, if you're talking about opening up a walking trail where the migratory bird was habitat sensation there, do we want to do that? So this is what I want to add into that statement.
Can I just ask for clarification? So if we change, you're right, this 2018 plan is about to expire. So if we just add the current, whatever the current plan is at the time, we can change that language. In terms of the specific, habitat that you want to protect, would the open space plan already identify those parcels? I think that it would. Or are you saying above and beyond what's identified?
Right. When we identify open space and when we're trying to utilize it, depends on the locations of it. Instead, so example, I'm looking at 2018, I was looking at opportunity of opening up Braintree Dam as a running trail. That's what impact the birds and migratory birds that are going from Blue Hill into that.
I see. Right, so we'll revise that, because you're saying when they redo the open space plan, they're going to take out the idea of recreation opportunities at the dam because it will hurt the migratory birds.
Right.
Okay,
so
I
that
understand. So
perspective I'm
we can
adding.
defer to whatever the new plan says.
Yeah.
Okay, I think I understand. So I think Beverly's just going to read back, and then we can move on to the next core theme.
Could I add
Actually,
more?
Sorry.
Justine, do you have more?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh,
and
I
then-
apologize. I
and
thought
then
you were
Juliet
done.
also had a comment or a question. So we'll finish and then we'll.
So also, I would like to add one is review, actually one that I'm consider is when you're talking about the bells, looking at alternative energy plan. I don't know do we have enough expertise to make that recommendation, or that should be Bell's own executive decision?
I believe Beld's already contemplating this, but I think maybe Eric knows the answer to that. Not to put you on the spot. Beld solar canopies.
Not this solar panel is one you're talking about.
I thought we got this. Are you talking about D?
Yeah,
Consider installing
cogeneration.
solar canopies in municipal parking lots to extend Beld.
No, the cogenerations.
Which one? Oh, H. Oh, I'm sorry.
The H. H.
Capital Improvement Strategies, H.
Okay, I don't recall where that one came from. A lot of these came from things that were already kind of in the works, but I'm not actually sure that that's the case for H. No? Okay. We're not sure. We'll have to check that, but it's a good point, yeah.
My point
Yeah.
is just they should have the expertise, not us, and that particular how it should evolve.
Yeah, and I mean, they should be included in these conversations as well. Anybody who's affected by these should be included.
Okay.
Yeah.
Also would like to add one, probably is actually two. One is about how can we make an inventory of the town's public facility regarding to energy saving. It probably could be done already, but I don't know, like example, all the lights and all the, like example, I see one of the example of
I
one
know
of
as
the
a
school
green
never turned down.
community, you're already doing that work, and I'm assuming that there's an updated plan. I can't remember, Melissa, if that's true.
I'm just taking notes. I can find out.
Yeah. But I know to get your green community designation, you needed to have a whole inventory of all public facilities. And
I think we might have an answer.
So Braintree presently, thank you, Madam Chair. Braintree presently is a green certified community. It currently receives state environmental grants. So we are, but that's just a start point, and I would certainly encourage us to go further with that.
One more item, if I may. I would like to educate Braintree residents and business owners about sustainability practice into this Team A,
Great.
code Team 1.
Thank you.
Okay,
Yes, sir.
Julia had one more thing.
Thank you. So sometimes in this document, you list specific items for focusing, and it's not always clear whether that's meant to be a comprehensive list of everything that we're focusing on or just a for example list. And in this section, you have, in letter B, invest in added amenities and recreation opportunities at existing spaces such as Braintree Dam, Braintree Town Forest, and Sunset Lake. So all of those are valid, and I hope that we will investigate those ways to improve all of those amenities. But that is intended in this case as just a such as and not a only these three?
Yeah, and we can add in addition to others or something like that to make it clear that that's just a example list.
Yeah, I think just to clarify that is my main comment.
Can I just mention that Braintree Dam is not owned by Braintree, so you might want to make note of that if you're thinking that it's not like a Sunset Lake, right?
All right.
Okay, we're moving on
I
to.
hope I didn't miss
theme
anybody.
two.
Okay, Beverly was going to quickly read, I think, what she came up with, just to clarify.
So enhance public access to existing open space and recreational amenities, improve wayfinding signage to public amenities, parks, and facilities. Just kind of tried to grab as much as I could in that one. Identify and prioritize a set of goals and plans for utilization of the Community Preservation Act funds. And then there was one about add a music program. I'm not sure what that one was for consideration. Identify density considerations for relief for projects that propose the highest green building, I think that finishing off that sentence, the highest green building practices. So that would be the addition of the word highest. Create a public user option for non-potable water distribution for use, distribution and use for industry and businesses, et cetera. On G, explore municipal fleet conversion to electric and/or hybrid as existing vehicles come offline per Braintree's 2020 energy reduction plan when economically feasible, and also ensure sufficient resources are available to the fire department to manage electric vehicle fires.
And then,
Oh, I'm keep going. There's adapt and update to the 2018 Open Space and Recreation Plan. Invest in added and recreation. Invest in added and recreation-based recommendation identified in the Open Space and Recreation Plan, with considering impacts to wildlife and habitat. So I'm not sure I have that one entirely clear. That has to do with B, invest in added amenities and recreation opportunities at existing open space. And then this one also is saying, with consideration, as updated in the Open Space Recreation Plan, with consideration to wildlife and habitat. I think I've got it. I'll try and rephrase that one. Create an inventory of town energy saving initiatives. Educate residents and business owners about sustainability practices. And on B, I think that, and this is another one, invest in added amenities and recreation opportunities, and in addition to Braintree Dam, Town Forest, and Sunset Lake, in addition to others. I'll add that. So that one's going to have a couple of things wordsmithed.
all right, so I think, is Chris presenting this one?
Hello again to the committee. Good to see you again. Core theme 2 is focused very much on economic development. At RKG, and I think the entire team, we do believe that economic development cuts across many different topic areas. The purpose of economic development is to serve quality of life for the community. And so as much as we talk here a lot about real estate development, we think it's important to keep in mind that there are relationships between economic development and all of these other core themes, very close relationships. So we began proposing these different strategy ideas with the context of the existing conditions in mind, understanding that Braintree is a growing place and a place that people want to be, businesses want to be, and identifying some of the opportunities within town that you may be interested in taking advantage of. So a lot of the strategy ideas that we've come up with are related to zoning, related to development processes, both streamlining certain ones, also making others maybe a little bit higher standard depending on what your specific desires are, but also about investing in specific properties, investing in specific positions within town government and specific initiatives within town government to help spread the word about the opportunities that are in Braintree beyond your borders. So I think that, again, we're very focused policy-wise on real estate development, but is always in the service of improved quality of life across the town. And with that, I welcome your questions and comments.
Peter, we'll start with you again.
Okay, on core theme 2, capital letter B, I don't remember us limiting those concepts to East Braintree Square. Is there an East Braintree Square?
Well, I think the landing, through the chair. Wayne.
So I would just expand that to include Braintree Square and South Braintree Square, equally deserving of streetscape improvements and beautification. And then I would just consider trying to highlight some of the parking issues in X and Y and elevate them in importance. They could probably be their own subcategory.
Okay.
That's it.
I think at B, it should be expanded to not only invest in streetscape improvements and beautification, but also the creation of additional parking to allow the squares to thrive. I mean, right now, there is no public parking in the landing whatsoever. And it's a problem. And the other two squares have inadequate public parking. So it would be nice to enhance each of the squares, but I suspect the business owners would love to see additional parking so that their customers and their employees can get to and from work or to and from the businesses so that they can compete, because right now they're having difficulty competing. And with respect to additions, I don't see anything here mentioning the South Shore Plaza. It's the biggest business in the town.
That's under,
It does.
under Q.
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And also discussed in the higher level goal associated with the theme too.
I'm sure I didn't catch what you meant.
The one level up from these strategy ideas, the goal, develop the first one under core theme 2, developing strategic community supported economic growth plans for area of the town that is appropriate for increased development, such as Ivor Street Corridor, South Shore Plaza, et cetera.
So in addition to Q, you just were referring to something else?
Just the goal, but
Oh.
the actual strategy is Q. Would you
Yeah.
want to add anything else beyond Q about South Shore Plaza?
Yes. Explore transportation services for arriving at the South Shore Plaza through public transportation. I know there is a bus, maybe 2 bus lines that go there, but there is no direct access from the South Shore Plaza to the Quincy Adams T Station, which is the nearest T station. And I would think that makes a lot of common sense.
Before Shelley goes, can I just ask Peter a question of clarification?
Of course.
Peter, when you talked about X and Y, I just want to make sure I understand. You said to elevate them, and I think I didn't understand it first. But do you mean, you see how Y has A, B, C, D, E, F, G? Do you mean to make those each their own strategy so that they're listed separately rather than a subset under Y? Is that what you meant by elevate them?
I wasn't thinking of it that way, but you could. I think that, yeah, because I notice now you're using these same subcategories throughout each of the core themes. So adding a parking subcategory probably wouldn't fit.
I see what you're saying.
But it just bleeds into every single issue. So, yeah, maybe just pulling them up a level
Right.
would do
That's
that.
what I'm thinking. And we can work on, I wouldn't worry too much about the categories yet. When we get to organizing the plan, we can talk about how you want to group these things. But I think if we do pull these A, B, C, G, like sub-bullets out of Y, they'll each get their own in the survey, basically, so they'll stand out individually. That sounds okay?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm not sure who came up with the idea of relocating the transfer station and partnering with private sector to develop the site, but I would be interested in hearing more about the subject.
Sure. That was something that we heard from actually a number of different people at the public forum. I think there were, off the top of my head, I think there were at least 4 or 5 people that either said it or put a Post-it note down on the board, specifically calling this out as a missed opportunity as things currently stand. So I think, if given direction, we can provide a little bit more detail on what that might entail, but it seemed like there were a number of people in town that saw that particular property as a key to unlocking a lot of potential in that area.
Was there any discussion with respect to where it would be relocated to?
No, I don't. Yeah, I think most people would be happy to see it go, and I think our understanding is that it's a private company operating that site, and eventually their lease will expire, and then a decision can be made about whether or not it returns.
That was the reason I asked the question, is because I can't imagine any place else in the town is going to welcome it. I think I've completed my questions and comments.
Thank you.
Shelley?
Great. Just some clarification, just on language. When you say on D, target industrial users, what would an industrial user, what would that be?
Well, in this instance, I think we had in mind some of the larger footprint tenants that are getting squeezed out of the denser parts of the urban core. So these may be manufacturing operations. They could be light manufacturing. They could be heavier, again, depending on what your preferences as a town are. Some of those may be related either directly or indirectly to life sciences, but it could also be something far simpler and less technically complex. It could be ball bearing manufacturing or something like that.
Like a manufacturer, okay.
Yes.
And then on G, you guys reference, look at the East Hampton Mass strategy. So I know in the previous category, we had like links to that. Would be able to get a link to what that is?
Absolutely.
Okay, excellent. And on M, just again, it's a language thing that I'm not familiar with. What would be a blue economy business?
Sure. Give me just one moment to finish the note for your previous comment on.
We
Okay,
can
great.
send you our notes. too.
Great, thank you, Beverly. I wasn't sure if you were involved.
just- Sure.
Yes, so blue economy is a category of industry, not necessarily industrial, but industry, that is focused on taking advantage of access to the ocean. So it might be boat repair or boat manufacturing. It could be aquaculture. So it could be like an oyster farm. Some of them are more research oriented, so actually sending research boats out to conduct surveys and studies. There's a really quite a wide range, but all directed towards the ocean, essentially.
And utilizing the access that we have
Exactly.
that we underutilize now. That makes
Exactly.
sense. And then on Z, hire a dedicated economic development staff member, which I think is a fabulous idea. But I did have this question, I think, in the last meeting that I attended. As of who right now, I mean, obviously that costs money, you need to create a posting, that needs to be approved, there's vetting, there's a whole thing that goes along with that. But if we were to identify who's supposed to be doing this right now, who would be the person that's supposed to be doing this right now? In the town, typically.
That's, if I may, through the chair, that's our office and the mayor's office.
Okay. I think that's it. Thanks.
Okay, thank you.
Julia?
The biggest thing I would add to this is, I think Braintree has a problem with underutilized and vacant properties, which is identified here. But what's not here that I see is to incentivize redevelopment or to come up with, maybe there, sometimes in this document we suggest hiring a consultant or conducting a study. And I'm not sure if what I'm suggesting is that we should conduct a study or if there are specific strategies that are clear to all of you experts and not clear to me on how to incentivize. I don't know, it seems like there are reluctant landowners in Braintree, and I don't understand why they hold on to properties without developing them for profit, but they do. And I would be very interested in knowing what we could do to motivate them to do better. But as property owners, they have rights, and thus far, we have been unsuccessful. So I'm interested in hearing your comment on that.
Certainly. I think some of the strategy ideas that we have listed in here are, as I mentioned, very focused on zoning, and I think in a lot of instances, that's a strong tool that the town can use to begin incentivizing change in land use and land use patterns. There may be landowners that are impervious to that type of convincing, but it can make it much more alluring to either redevelop it themselves because they can themselves gain more economic benefit from it, or to sell it to someone who is more motivated to transform a property. There are other tools too, such as eminent domain, but of course that can come at a cost, both politically and fiscally, for the town itself. And I think one of the maybe less direct ways that that you can approach this as a municipality is, to your point, to your mention of hiring consultants. It doesn't have to be led by a consultant, but to make a plan. I think to establish a very clear vision for what a specific area of your town can be, can help either that landowner or other landowners understand exactly what you want to see, and take a little bit of the risk out of the development process.
Okay, so I think what I'm going to suggest, and I am certainly opening to edits on this, this is just a first stab, is we should develop strategies to incentivize redevelopment in underutilized and vacant properties. And then a related but somewhat separate issue is that there are properties in Braintree that are just outmoded because we have a changing retail environment where those properties are not as successful as they once were. And there's several examples. Yeah. And I would like to also identify strategies to motivate properties that are in need of redevelopment to be economically vibrant and modern. Okay, so I'll leave there at that. And if the rest of you guys have things to add to that idea, I would welcome that. But I will add in letter I, it says create an arts and culture plan, including a study of existing public and vacant commercial space. Do you mean a study of space that could be transformed to be used for the arts?
Precisely.
Okay, can we just add that, to be transformed for use in the arts? Because I wasn't sure about that. And then in letter W, where we talk about the connection between housing and various commercial and industrial development, in a separate item, we specifically talk about life science. And because life science is something that Braintree really wants, but it's very, very competitive, I think it's worth calling it out also specifically in letter W. And,
okay.
Excuse me.
Bless you.
Oh, no, you already asked about blue economy, so that's all I have. Thank you.
I have a lot, no, just one. You modernized use tables to address the need for the 21st century plans. Oh, letter U. Can you explain to me what is 21st century tenants?
Yes, I think a word may have gotten dropped off. I think we were specifically commercial and industrial tenants for what that's worth. But in many towns, most towns in the greater Boston area, the zoning codes include use tables that are restrictive in that they don't specifically address industries that exist today that didn't exist 50, 60, 70 years ago when those zoning codes were first adopted. And because they are not expressly called out, it can make the development process geared towards those tenants more onerous. A developer proposing a project has to get a little bit more creative and do a little bit more convincing of a planning board or a zoning board of appeals that their desired use is in agreement with an existing zoning code. We have not yet identified specific instances, but I think we particularly had life sciences in mind. There are a whole subset of life science users out there, and even just saying very specifically in your zoning code that, for instance, a good manufacturing practice facility is an allowable use in a district can go a long way towards simplifying the development process.
Gotcha. All right, thank you, that's it.
So I have an ad. So in the spirit of partnership, can we require our like large corporations that are in Braintree to submit to like a 5-year, because we say, you know, plan for the transformation of the South Shore Plaza, and we can't plan for that. I mean, like, they won't even tell us what they want to do, right? So we can't plan for that. So, but could we say in the spirit of partnership with a developer or like a Simon Mall, that we would require, especially if they're coming for any zoning changes, like we don't need parking anymore, or, you know, whatever that zoning change is, that we would require a 5-year plan? We can't do that?
If I may, through the chair, there is no requirement in the state law when you rezone a property to even say what you're going to do with it tomorrow, never mind in 5 years. Braintree's created this pattern where people show plans so that people can get comfortable about what they're going to do. But there is absolutely no requirement for them to follow that plan or to adhere to that plan. When you rezone something to general business, highway business, commercial, it's kind of fair game in that, quote, district.
But a lot of these things aren't like required by law, but we hope, you know, like in the spirit of partnership, that they will communicate with the community, I guess.
But a lot of these things aren't, a rezone is an actual action that's laid out in state law. So a lot of these things are just ideas and things that communities are doing around sort of hot topics. Placing a requirement on a statutory process that's laid out in state law,
Won't work.
That gets a little dicey.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what is a successful, can you give me an example of a community that has hired a successful economic development strategic plan, and what does that plan look like? What are the key components of that plan?
Sure. Can I add something to your question about the
Yes.
partnership and the mall? Just 'cause I think it's a good question. We worked on a plan for Framingham and Natick at the Golden Triangle where the Natick Mall is, and for the area around that. And while the mall owner was not the one who stepped forward to put the plan in place, it was driven by the city of Framingham and the town of Natick through a grant that they got, I think through Mass DOT. And we ended up creating, we were part of the team that created sort of a big look at the whole area that did include the mall, and thought about modernizing zoning, major transportation improvements, and the like. So that was something that was initiated by the two communities, but included the mall as a key partner. And I just saw Mass Development just funded a study for the Burlington Mall in the town of Burlington, Mass, and sort of looking at the same thing. How could the Burlington Mall sort of think about modernizing over time, particularly as you mentioned, parking may not be as needed as it once was, as the mall sort of goes through changes. So even though the South Shore Plaza may not initiate that 5-year plan, in the spirit of partnership, maybe there's a way that the town could maybe get a grant or approach the mall and say, hey, if we got a grant, would you be interested in, working with us on thinking through what this place could look like in 5, 10, or 15 years? So there are examples of that happening.
Sure, that's interesting.
But they're often municipally driven.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, the economic development strategy. Yeah, there's tons of examples, both in Mass and across the country. We've worked on dozens of them, both in the state and around the country. Typically, it's a look at almost like a master plan of existing conditions, but it's heavily focused on your workforce and labor force, your businesses and industry base, your regulations and incentive program, your skills, the skills of your workforce, both who are here in the community, but those who are coming into work. And then we take all that information. Yep, it also includes a whole real estate analysis, both of what the market is looking for, as well as how your land is being used today and your zoning regulations, how the land could be used today into the future. We take all that information and we come up with essentially what are your, we call them a target industry analysis, which takes a whole host of factors and says this is really what you should be targeting going forward if you are trying to attract new business, help the businesses that are here today grow and expand, foster entrepreneurship of really small businesses, not just going after the big fish and trying to bring folks in. And it looks at all those factors, gives you the target industries, and then a set of really detailed implementation steps.
That's awesome. That would be amazing here in
Yeah,
Braintree.
just not to belabor the point, but the reason why we had that in here is, you know, if I'm just being quite frank, I look at Braintree and I think there's just so much opportunity here for a lot of different things. And for a town of this size, you also have a lot of, you have squares, you have other commercial districts, you have corridors, you have the Red Line Station, you have industrial parks. So there's just so many different really cool opportunities here. And I almost feel like with a plan, you could start to say, well, this should go here and maybe this could go here. The master plan is going to do some of that, but this would go to the next level.
You're hired. Oh, my goodness.
Okay.
I'm sorry. Oh.
Good question.
About this specifically. Okay.
Questions regarding to the requirement. I know for the zoning is not requirement for the 5-year plan, but is it possible to say that we as you say, we ask them for it, but for special permit, is it possible to require it if they go beyond there?
No, I mean, what they had described is kind of like you're sort of front-loading it with the study versus somebody wants to do something and then you're asking them to tell us what you want to do for the next 5 years. A special permit is a regulatory document that's issued for a specific use as requested at a specific place. I understand sort of what people are asking and why they're asking it, and that's something that the town could do as part of an economic plan or a strategic plan. I mean, communities do those all the time. The town that I live in has one, and that's how we, you know, go about development and where we want to put what and make money and, you know, all that good stuff. But as far as putting that on the requirement of a developer or a particularly property owner, when you put a requirement on a special permit, you have to, there needs to be a connection between what you're asking them to do and or the condition and what they're asking you for. So if we'll make an example, let's say the South Shore Plaza wanted to put a fast food in the parking lot. And we turn around and say, okay, approved, but we want a 5-year plan of the whole property. Like, there needs to actually be like a nexus and a connection from those conditions to what's actually being asked for and what's being permitted at that time, if that makes any sense.
Thank you. And then Raina has a question.
Sorry. If I heard correctly, not a special permit, but sometimes you have, and it's related to a master plan, is phased development for a large property, and you would require, it's like for an overlay district or a real plan, you know, development for a large area, then you could ask them for that. I've seen it with large institutions, like large educational institutions. That's one way that can get it, what I thought you were looking for, which may come out of this, but, you know, I think you're asking the right question. You're just not sure how it would fit your idea.
Thank you. Okay, that's all I had, so. Joe, you're next.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to, this has been a great conversation. This just last 5 minutes. This has made my evening, just this conversation alone. I love the fact that we are identifying what are the realities and what are the parameters legally that we have to deal with. the rights of property owners, the rights of communities, municipalities, how they fit together, what is a master plan versus what is a regulatory zoning set of rules, etc. And I think that there's a number of items here in this particular core theme for economic growth that lends itself to a good faith on the part of the town to work with business owners in neighborhoods to incentivize a collaboration of a vision to take advantage of what are the realities that we face in the town of Braintree today, what are our assets, what are our challenges, and to really, in a good faith manner, address those in a very collaborative fashion. And so, to that end, I'd like to see us create a more robust and proactive public-private partnership incentive program, with the word incentive really being emphasized here. In this case, that there are a number of needs the town has that we can't afford at the moment, or maybe even into the future. I could list all kinds of different challenges the town has right now, just from a financial and infrastructure standpoint, and it's really overwhelming where we are. And so, being a bit more creative and a bit more collaborative in the sense that there's this give and a take, that's a very reasonable give and take, of course, that the community can get behind, for us to take advantage of assets that some of our private industries or businesses have that are located here in this town, to help us address some of these initiatives from an infrastructure. There's a number of items that you pointed out here, F, L, Q, U, V, W, just to name a few, that really paint a picture of how widespread our challenges are, but a collaborative public-private partnership, really working together, that's focused, clear, not overcomplicated, just clear, straightforward, I think is going to be, would be a major positive for our master plan. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Raina?
Thank you. So I'll stick to two things, I think, given all that's been discussed. In letter J, where you talk about establishing technical assistance to help retailers, could you add some examples and some types of programs that are typical for this kind? Because I think there are quite a few out there that I think would help people a little bit with that. And L, which is related to what we've been discussing, where we talk about conducting outreach to commercial space owners to understand about why vacancies persist. I'd like to expand that and ask them a little bit more about what would help them, and what role the town would have, and what would be some incentives and help to them to make it better utilized, to have a better mix or whatever. So it could be separate, but if we're going to ask them about one thing, let's ask them about, I'll call it the universe around those problems. So that's, what are incentives, what would help them do better, that sort of thing. So that's all I have.
Liz?
Thank you. I have a couple of items that I wanted to run by you. Number S, can you please explain to me what you mean by, and I think I know, but I want to make sure I understand it properly, eliminate all instances of split zoning to encourage redevelopment of existing underused parcels?
So when we were looking at the zoning, and also when we had the initial economic development focus group, I don't know if it was the people who were at that table at the time, but there was a big focus on zoning and sort of how zoning was potentially limiting the reuse or the redevelopment of mostly the industrial properties in some cases, where off of a major roadway corridor, I'm just going to make this up because I don't remember the number.
Sure.
Melissa probably knows off the top of her head, but off of that corridor, a certain number of feet, maybe it's 100 feet, you might have industrial, and then it might, on the same parcel of land, because of the depth of the parcel, it might then change to residential or some other zone.
Mm-hmm.
So what you can do on the front portion of the parcel is very different than the back, which
Right.
ends up creating use conflicts and not really a,
Okay, so based on that, and I did understand it correctly, currently that is a subject that's very near and dear to me with some issues in town, and what I see as a problem with that is, hang on, I wrote my notes somewhere and I'm trying to find them. Got too many notes. I think special attention, maybe if we can add to this, because if maybe you just have, oh, I don't know, say a commercial zoning abutting a highway business or something, it might not be that impactful, but when you have split zoning where you've got residential abutting highway business or commercial, I think special attention needs to be taken to protecting the residential zoning. So I would like to see something added there that the buffer be enhanced above and beyond. I think, as we've talked about throughout all of the vision statement, the big priority has been to protect our existing residential neighborhoods. So I think we want to increase buffer zones, and I think that that might be one area where we might want to do that. So if we could just add something to that effect to especially pay attention to protect residentially zoned areas with buffer zones. And then, in addition to that, what do you mean in V, create neighborhood plans for Braintree Square, South Braintree Square, Five Corners, East Braintree, and the Landing? What do you mean by the neighborhood plans for that?
We were thinking, those are all very unique, sort of defined centers, smaller neighborhood-focused commercial centers. So we're thinking the master plan will have, usually kind of higher level strategies or recommendations for these areas, but given the, some of the things that we've heard both tonight and through the public process, where do we park? How do we enhance the streetscape? Do we change the zoning to either incentivize or disincentivize? Do we change it from Euclidean zoning to more of a form-based code so it's more, predictable? How do we fill vacant spaces or vacant storefronts? I'm just throwing out different ideas. But those kinds of more detailed plans for the squares or these sort of neighborhood centers would, I think, help the town and the surrounding neighborhood and residents get more into the details than what a master plan will get to.
Okay, thank you. That's it for me.
Joe?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just on the last point, the first point that Liz raised, I would agree with there are opportunities for us to enhance and increase buffer zones between zone uses. But I think it's important that we clarify what this point is about: a split zone for one lot.
Yeah.
Not splitting between.
Okay, not two
Right,
different.
exactly.
Okay. I see what
There
you're
is a
saying.
situation on Front Street, for example, that we had where it was one plot, it was a single-family home, half of the property or the lot was commercial, the other half was Res B.
Right.
And so those create really tough problems
Yeah.
for those
Right.
neighborhoods that abut another different type of zone use.
Okay.
So I would support what you're saying as far as the principle of the buffer zone. However, I think it's important that we make that distinction this evening, that this split zoning has to do with a individual lot.
Okay,
Right.
thank you.
Thank you.
Justine?
Okay, from J, establish a technical assistance program. I see we have a lot of hiring someone, establish some program. I'm not sure the funding perspective, but as a small business owner myself, I utilize a lot of SBA administration to help me fund my property and, to go to training with the local training program. So where I would like to see, instead establish a program perspective is how do we educate local small business to utilize what we have from the state perspective. And I didn't understand what you meant by retail and other ground floor occupants, because I thought we were just focused in that program is helping our small business versus like a big company that coming over. And if you're looking at the, if you're looking at number N, hire consultant, could that be underneath that? Just like you have in the X with ABC, as one of the action versus one of the tasks versus its own item on J. That's just my feedback on my experience with small business. And the last question I had, the question is, you talk a lot about workplace, live where you work. For me, I just, for work-life balance, I don't think I want to live next to my coworker, that perspective. So I don't know how important that is for our master plan.
Should we move? Oh, are you going to summarize?
Which letter is that one? I'm sorry, Justine.
Keep O.
So is there an alternative or a change, or were you just making a comment on that one?
I'm just
Yeah,
making
maybe
common
Eric could-
perspective of like the importance of it. We all over the place, we're talking about developing, increasing housing for for the workforce perspective. I'm just making a comment from my personal experience is I live in Braintree because I don't want to work in Braintree.
Yeah, I think Eric has a clarification on that.
Is that okay? Okay. Just what we meant in O, I think that was one you're referring to. When we looked at the jobs in Braintree and compared it to the jobs that Braintree residents actually hold, there was a mismatch there. So a lot of Braintree residents are headed out to other places because the jobs that they hold aren't really here in high percentages. But Braintree obviously is, let's say, big retail employer, obviously, with the mall. But a lot of folks who work in retail don't necessarily live in Braintree. So what our idea here was try to maybe create a better balance of jobs in the future so that not as many Braintree residents have to commute out for those jobs. So it makes their commute shorter, they save more money on it, makes their quality of life get a little bit better. That's kind of what we meant by that.
It was focused more on the creation of commercial space that is a better fit for current Braintree residents.
Okay, because, sorry, it's just the whole plan has a lot of space where we're talking about the workforce living, housing. That's my question. If it's clarified, bringing the industry where most of residents, it belongs to, like most of our residents probably in biotechs. So that's a different than what is there in O, if maybe we just add some clarifications.
Sure.
Thank you.
Do you want to do a summary?
So this is beginning at B. I think that we had 2 edits, and I think they went together. So invest in streetscaping I'm sorry, invest in, I'm sorry, I went too far, 1 second. Invest in streetscape improvements and beautification that enhance East Braintree Square, and then I also have South Braintree Square. His role as a gateway to the city and improve parking availability.
It probably should say Braintree Square also. There's like 3.
I have East Braintree Square and Braintree Square.
There is no East Braintree Square. No, I think, yeah, the landing. I know.
So, okay. So I have East Braintree Square, the landing, South Braintree Square, and Braintree Square, role as a gateway to the city and improve parking availability. Okay, the next one I have is explore transportation choices and options to South Shore Plaza. Remove subset recommendations under Z. So I think that those were supposed to become their own recommendations. I believe that's, I'm sorry, under Y. Those are supposed to become their own recommendations. I will say, just wanted to make a point that if they are their own recommendations, and if you're only selecting 10, that in this way they all get picked up as one, but as 10 it might create a, it was Y, I'm sorry, it was Y, yep. So, but I have that recommendation also. Add a link to G. Develop strategies to incentivize redevelopment of underutilized property. And then I also have, after that, identify strategies to encourage redevelopment of property become more vibrant. So I think those, I had those two. I don't know if I got those entirely right. And then I believe the next one is L. Oh, hang on a minute. Sorry, it's I. Create an arts and culture plan, including a study of existing public and vacant commercial space to be transformed for art. W, conduct a study to understand Braintree's ability to attract new commercial industrial development with attention to workforce housing needs and life science. I don't know if this one was supposed to be included. Work with developers to better understand long-term development plans. Create a more robust and proactive public-private partnership to address infrastructure needs. I don't know if I got that one entirely right. Okay. J, establish a technical assistance program to help retailers and other ground floor occupants enhance their options. I think add examples to that one is the recommendation. L, conduct outreach to commercial space owners to understand why vacancies persist, with particular attention to how the town can help them and what incentives would be useful to them. S, eliminate all instances of split zoning to encourage redevelopment of existing underused parcels, with special attention to be taken to mitigate the impact of uses incompatible with residential uses, including the use of residential buffers. Nope, there's still one. J, and I think this was a new one. I don't know, I think if it was an addition or if it was a new one, but provide information to local businesses about what state resources are available to help their business. And that's the last one I have.
Okay. And I am just watching the time here. I'm wondering if it would be okay if we skip our little intro presentation? Unless you found that very helpful. I'd like to just get to your comments. Is that okay? Okay. So the next one is the transportation core theme. And Juliet is here to answer questions. And so do you want to just start with Peter again?
Yes, Peter.
Would be under the planning policies and zoning strategies section. Should there be something similar to, we saw modernized use tables. Should we see something called modernized parking requirements?
Yes, please.
Peter, is that it?
That's it.
Okay. Dave?
Before I comment further, what is wayfinding?
Good question. Wayfinding is basically a fancy way of describing the types of signage, and sometimes it's other things besides signage that helps you get around your community or a community. So it's how you find your way. Helps you find your way.
I would like to add, partner with the MBTA,
Partner with the MBTA?
yes, to prioritize services to business locations so that people don't have to drive to their businesses if they can go from one of the train stations to a business location. Like, for instance, Braintree Hill Office Park. It's a 5-minute drive from the Quincy Adams T station, and I don't think there is any way of getting from the Quincy Adams T station over to the Braintree Hill Office Park, or for that matter, the South Shore Plaza. So it probably would involve adding services that don't currently exist, but I think it makes sense to try to do that.
Yeah.
Also, with respect to the section F, in addition to having bicycle parking, I think we need to also address how you get from point A to point B on a bicycle in the town of Braintree without getting killed. Whether it's separate bike lanes or bike paths. On existing streets or even in parks. Like, for instance, there is no way of getting from Pond Meadow Park to the Braintree T station. And there may be a way of doing that if it was a priority. That's it for me.
Thanks.
Shelley?
I too like the idea of working more closely with the MBTA about more consistent busing or schedules. And then the only other comment I have is on D, when it talks about critical maintenance needs for sidewalks, the condition and the data. I don't know if we can put something in here about the consistent look and the materials used. There's some new sidewalks in the Highlands area. One side of the street still has kind of a concrete, what's the name of it? It's getting late now, I can't even think of it. But anyways, and then asphalt, you know, for the sidewalk, and then the other side of the street has just asphalt, the asphalt. So you're going down a really nice street and you have two different sidewalk looks, so some sort of consistency or standard.
Great, thank you.
Curb, that was the word, curb. Curb. See, it's late. My brain is shut down. It's okay, you get it.
Anything else?
Nope, that was it.
Okay, Julia?
Yep.
So my main comment on this is that I would like to see a more robust presence of, a focus on ADA improvements in Braintree. We have been working for a long time with the Center for Human-Centered Design, or I don't think I'm getting the name quite right, but they've been helping us to develop a very comprehensive ADA accessibility transition plan.
Great.
And in this portion of the document, we're not talking about the interior buildings, we're just talking about transportation.
Yeah.
But that's a part of, ADA is a part of that too. And so I think the place to put this could be in letter D, to add a letter beneath D that suggests that we implement design changes to improve ADA accessibility on sidewalks and crossings and in parking lots, among other things.
Can you say that one more time? Because you said it really well, and I didn't
Thank
catch
you. I think we'd do letter D.
Yep.
We'd add a subcategory, letter C, that says to implement design changes to improve ADA accessibility on sidewalks and crossings and in parking lots, among other things.
Okay, great. Thank you.
That's it for me.
Denver?
No questions, comments on this.
I have just one thing. I know we were talking about the I think it's a great idea if the MBTA could get buses and do anything right at any time. But I would hate to hope, like I feel like they're a failing system and I'd hate to lay my hopes and dreams on them. But I noticed at different like communities, like Burlington, I think was one of them, they have the private buses, right, from their different office parks to the T station. And I think that would be great to have a private partnership with transportation if we're going to beef up some of these commercial zones to get them to add that transportation. I think that would be great. And that's all I have.
Great, thank you.
Joe, your turn.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Very similar idea on this theme of the public-private partnership. So related to point S and point U, design and implement a public-private partnership program to create on-demand bus and shuttle services between public transit centers and commercial/industrial business centers. So we do have a program in town, and Melissa might be able to talk to this a little bit, just to reference. I know we had at one point a bylaw, I believe it was in the form of a bylaw, but as far as conditions go in front of planning board applicants who had an impact, that they would, on any particular intersections or roadways, that they would contribute to a fund. Lack of a better term, you might be able to correct that for me. It wasn't what I would call, or if my recollection is correct, it wasn't as robust as we thought it could be.
If I may, through the chair. So we do have, we call it our traffic mitigation fund, and we, when projects aren't large enough to rise to the level of their own individual impact, and they have a whole mitigation plan associated with that, in order to sort of capture those incremental increases, a little bit from this guy, a little bit from this lady here, we do have a fund. I don't have the balance off the top of my head, but it's, for example, requesting $20,000, $30,000. We keep it kind of open now so that we can use it a little more flexibly. Back in the day, they would get a little more specific and say $50,000 for 5 corners, or X amount of dollars for this corridor. And that money we use to track. For example, the town engineer, we recently used the money I saw here on the list. I think it's in the transportation section, and I crossed it out because the town engineer is doing this right now.
Signalization?
He's doing the inventory.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, he's working with Beta Engineering to go through all of the signals in town and sort of,
Right.
rate them, say what's wrong with them, what could be done to improve them, that type of stuff. So we're using the money for that.
Okay, thank you. I didn't mean to interrupt you. In that spirit of that program is now you evolve that into a public transportation, on-demand shuttle type of service. Presently, myself and actually another member of this committee, Councilor Flaherty, are participants in the South Shore Transportation Coalition. Working with MAPC and the communities in the South Shore, we're sharing various solutions of how they provide shuttle services for seniors, on-demand shuttle services around town, how they've partnered with the state for creating alternative means of medium to longer term commutes, et cetera. But down at a local level, we have a great opportunity, I think, whereas we're facing a lot of opportunities, as Erica, I'll just quote you, and I think I agree with you. There's a lot of opportunities here in this community of Braintree for us to make this a good quality community, maintain its quality of life, but to be able to take advantage of the economics around us to create and enhance our quality of life, take traffic off the roads, such as a public-private partnership of shuttle buses between our transportation centers. You've got, Dave made another great example. You've got Braintree Hill Office Park, which is 5 minutes by the crow's fly. You can almost hit it with a rock. Standing on the top of Braintree Hill Office Park, you could hit Adams Station, Quincy Adams. They do have some private companies there do run shuttle services for their employees only, but it's not for the entire park itself. Scale it up a little bit, have a study, look at that. Let's see if we can create something. Thank you.
Raina?
I don't have anything to add or have any questions at this time. Thanks.
Liz?
Okay, and I just have one item, and it's kind of on what Melissa was talking about and a little bit of what Joe was mentioning. I think there needs to be sort of an, and there may already be this, sort of an overall management of all of the major intersections to be monitored and managed on a regular basis. And when an intersection is a level B, a D or below, I think, you know, red flags need to go up and we need to start doing something, whether it be that we need to redesign it or recalibrate it or, you know, be more mindful about what type of development goes in there. I think there needs to be standards set for these levels of service at these intersections and be monitored regularly. Thank you.
Justine?
Thank you. I have this question, but don't know where to put it. Example is when there's a big development proposed, they only do traffic study that impact their area of commute, but not study impact the towns as a whole, and also study impacts for the whole year versus only the 60% of the standard traffic practice. So example, I'm just pointing out to the malls, the new development that we're talking about, the hot topics, where the study is talking about only traffic signal change to impact the mall traffic, but what happened after the mall, which is the five corners bottleneck, is not required and is not being looked at. And when our resident asks, what about holiday traffic? It's not being looked at because that's only 40%, but that's where our residents got killed, you know, got stuck in the traffic. I'm not even going to the mall doing it. So my question, I don't know where it fit, but would like to add the statement there, indicate, you know, any traffic proposed need to look in the town as a whole, not one general area improvement and impact the other.
Do we want to skip
Yeah,
the
actually,
recap?
Juliet, I think, could summarize. Thank you.
I'll do it quickly. Modernized parking requirements, I think that might have been part of a previous discussion. Define wayfinding. Partner with the MBTA to prioritize and add service to different locations in the community, in the town, to encourage more options for getting from train stations to different destinations. And there was a particular focus on business and employment centers as well as shopping without needing a car. Add bicycle connections throughout the community, on and off-road connections, looking sort of at maybe a town-wide network plan. Provide guidance on sidewalk materials and consistency of application. Focus on ADA improvements. I mentioned that we should reference the human-centered design transition plan and specifically add an item to D to implement design changes to improve ADA accessibility on sidewalks and crossings and in parking lots, among other things. Explore, again, reiterating exploring the options for public-private shuttles to provide local transportation connections. And then there were some good ideas about public-private programs to create on-demand services to operate between employment centers and key transit nodes. Thinking about linking that to the funding that's currently required of certain developments, the Traffic Mitigation Fund. Understanding how to manage, keeping in mind that we have to manage all of our intersections, assessing the level of service on a regular basis and have regular monitoring to understand issues and make targeted investments and improvements, particularly when developments are coming forward. And then requiring traffic impact studies to cover a larger area and a longer period of time and that would require some updates to your development regulations. So hopefully I captured everything. Great suggestions, thank you.
All right, should we move on to housing?
Oh,
Okay.
2 more. All right, just 2 more. Peter, your turn.
So just a question, if someone can explain. Paragraph P, take advantage of MBTA 3A district requirements to encourage transit accessible housing. And if that is related to transit-oriented development, or is that something?
Yeah, that's a
entirely
great
different?
question. So we're really looking to try to describe housing that's near the trains. You can call it what you want. We know that, there are certain trigger words, and we don't want to go into a realm that people will react to because of past history. And so we're basically searching, just to be completely frank with you, we're searching for ways to describe housing that are near train station. So we looked at transit accessible, transit supportive. I mean, it could also be buses, but primarily we're looking at your trains. Yeah.
And
yeah.
Transit supportive is a term that I was familiar with in my former employ, working up in Washington, Seattle area, and it really did focus on not just providing housing, but providing a mix of uses within, I'd say, a reasonable distance of the transit station to create a vibrancy all day long and create utilization of that investment on, all day long, not just people coming in or people leaving. So it really does introduce the idea of both housing, but also a mix of uses within walking distance, so that you have people coming and going for a variety of purposes, not just commuters in and out. So it's a little bit broader than just residential. It really does talk about a mix of uses that creates, I would say, 24/7 utilization of transit.
And why do we want to take advantage of that?
Well,
Is that
we were mostly looking at the vision that, talked about housing near train stations, essentially, and looking at how to support that kind of housing. I think Beverly was throwing into the mix, making it more of neighborhood-oriented rather than isolated.
Okay, thank you.
Dave?
I'm probably the only person in the room that can address some of the issues that a lot of people are concerned about. I live within 5 minutes walk of 500 apartments easily. Some are in Braintree, some are in Weymouth, but they're very nearby. They happen to be near a train station, and they happen to be near 2 bus lines. And the town of Braintree and the town of Weymouth incentivized local property owners probably 10+ years ago to improve their properties, and it's happened. There are probably 5 to 6 apartment buildings that have been built on either the Braintree or the Weymouth side of the landing in less than 10 years, and there's still at least one big one underway. I'm not against it. I'm probably the only person around here who's not against it. However, with some of this, there hasn't been any mitigation, And I've been trying to figure out where to address mitigation, and I couldn't figure out whether it should be addressed in the economic development section or in the housing section. And I'm thinking I'm leaning toward the housing section because that seems to be where the development is going to be either taking place or forced upon the town, depending on how things happen in the state of Massachusetts.
David, could you just clarify what you mean by mitigation? Are you thinking of something specific, or are you talking about traffic mitigation, or what are you talking
No,
about?
I'm thinking about, for instance, situations where a developer wants to propose 500 apartments and is making proposals and promises in the process about all the good things that might happen if those apartments get built. And there'll be this process of some people believing it, some people saying it's not true, whatever might be the situation. But I think everybody will agree that if you put up a big project, wherever it's located, it's going to have an impact in the surrounding area. So, you know, I'm thinking of, for instance, when Gillette Stadium was built, the town of Foxborough got a mitigation package that addressed what they thought would be traffic problems on Route 1. And a lot of changes occurred on Route 1 to address what would probably have been big traffic jams for all of those events at Gillette Stadium. And I haven't heard that being bantered about in the town, yet we know that there will be impacts from the development, whether it's proposed right now at the South Shore Plaza or whether it's development that the state requires be done near the train stations. It's going to have an impact, and the developers are only going to do these projects if they can make money. So if they know they can make money on some of these projects, why wouldn't we build some type of public policy within the town of Braintree to seek mitigation on what impacts it might have for the town? You know, some people think that the 500 apartments that are going to go up at the South Shore Plaza, if they get built, will have an impact on the school system. I don't know whether it will or it won't. From what I understand, we're down 20% since the beginning of COVID. So I don't know whether it's going to have any impact or not. And even if it does, it might be good to have the 20% recaptured. But there may be other situations where if it's another 500 apartments that are proposed over at, say, the transfer station, well, if those apartments add 100 kids to the school system, maybe we should try to package mitigation as part of that process. I don't see why we wouldn't do it. And if it's a developer who's acting in good faith and who really wants to invest in the town instead of just coming in, making quick money and getting out, if you know you're going to have an impact on the town, do something about it. And in the process, maybe the developers can do things that local officials don't have enough power to do. For instance, dealing with the biggest intersection problems in the town of Braintree. I mean, we can talk about Five Corners all we want, but the Braintree split is 10 times worse than Five Corners. I drove into Boston Saturday afternoon, and the traffic was backed up from the Braintree split to the O'Neill Tunnel at 1 in the afternoon. My guess is that it was backed up in all the other directions too. And that affects Braintree. It affects our economic base. It affects any business that's trying to do business in this town. How many people avoid going to Braintree because they don't want to go through the Braintree split? It's easier to drive 25 miles in another direction sometimes. The same is true with respect to the rotary. It backs up onto the highway all the time. It's dangerous. If we can't address that problem, people are going to die. You know, we've got a proposal right now for that hotel that's closed up that is probably going to impact that area with more traffic. And I don't know if any mitigation has been offered, and I don't expect one developer to pay for a redesign of the Braintree Rotary. But as that area changes, if the developers have some juice with the state that wants all these apartments to be built, maybe in the process we can also request mitigation that will redesign some of these big problems that we have in the town. That's where I think that should be put in here, as opposed to the economic development, because in the economic development it might get confrontational at a time when we're trying to get them to invest in the town, whereas with respect to the housing, it's going to be confrontational anyway, so we might as well try to do the mitigation there. That's all I have to add.
Melissa, I know we're running really short on time, but would you just briefly be able to describe what the town already does to negotiate, particularly traffic mitigation?
Yes, I'd love to, if I may, through the chair. As the person who is often tasked with coming up with mitigation plans and is often told that's too much, being completely honest, I think this town has done themselves a disadvantage by not pushing the mitigation envelope a lot further than they currently do. I am not the final call on that, but I think to sort of raise the bar or make that something that is more transparent to developers when they're coming to town. I know some communities do basic formulas, this many cars, this much money, and you just create those fees up front, and everybody is sort of taking their piece of the pie. That kind of goes back to one of the comments I had made, or in reference to the traffic fund. When somebody isn't at that level and making improvements, we try to ask them for some money, and it's done in a very not perfected and uniform way, I should say. And I have to say this town has to do a better job, and the town as a whole, all public officials need to understand that the only person we're hurting is ourselves. And I know the chair had mentioned Burlington. I worked in Burlington before. Burlington looks the way it does and functions the way it does because they are beyond, I don't even know the term, but they're all about mitigation. And the mitigation packages they were getting on projects 20 years ago when I left exceed the mitigation that we're getting on projects here today. So I'm all about mitigation. If this committee wants to help try to get more of that, I'm game for that. I think that we're not pushing as much as we should, and we need to do more and we need to do better, because we're the ones that are left, and the residents driving around town are the ones that are left with those impacts. So I think we can do a lot better, and I think it's probably at the point where it's something that should be more perfected and uniformed in the form of a policy, so that it applies to everyone regardless of who, what, where, and why.
All right. Are you done, David?
I think so.
All right.
Shelley?
Just very few questions. C, when you talk about working with Housing Authority and affordable housing developments, would that be like a Habitat for Humanity? Would something like that be included in that?
It could be. It depends on what the parcels are. So this is an idea to have the town actually use its own funds, like CPA funds, for example.
Oh, okay. All right.
To acquire private property that's vacant or underutilized. It's a pretty expensive idea, but it depends on the property. I think depending on the size of the property, you might work with a Habitat for Humanity type developer on a smaller property. But if it's a larger reuse, property, a bigger vacant underutilized building, you might want a different scale developer.
Okay. And then on I, when we're talking about the MBTA zoning requirements, we've mentioned multiple times, what date do we have to comply with that by? Do we know that, Melissa?
Eric would know.
Eric would know that?
We can ask him.
Okay, we'll revisit that. Okay.
Yeah, Eric's working with you guys on the MBTA zoning right now.
Okay, perfect. And on W, when you're talking about review and track available workforce housing, and you have these kind of percentages, what do those mean? I just don't know.
So that means there's different levels of affordability.
Yeah.
And so when you're talking about affordable housing that counts on towards your 10%
Right,
that you're
yeah.
required, it's actually lower than this. It's 80% of the area median income and less. This is talking about a higher income bracket.
Okay.
And so there are lots of different definitions, but in Massachusetts there are, this is kind of a common definition of what workforce housing means. It means a little higher income up to 120% of the area median income. So I don't know what that translates to right now, but we can certainly get you that income range if you're interested to know, it would change from year to year, but if you're interested to know at this moment, what would that income range be?
No, I mean, I don't necessarily.
Goals-
You've given us the information about what our median income is,
Yeah.
depending upon no, it wasn't, I just didn't know exactly what it reflected.
Did you want to?
I was just going to say, it goes, right now, if I may through the chair, it goes up to about 150,000.
That's right. That's
Yeah,
what I thought,
it's up there.
145, 150, yeah.
It's up
okay.
there.
Oh, and then Eric can answer my question.
Yeah, do you know when the MBTA requirement for Braintree is for?
When do we
When
have
their
to be
time frame?
compliant by?
No, their time frame that they have to comply by.
It's end of the year, isn't it?
What's the question?
Yeah. Rapid transit communities are the end of this year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep, end of this year.
Area to comply for the MBTA zoning requirements, which would then open up the opportunities in that area. Is that what we're talking about? Got it. All right. That's it.
Okay. Julia?
On letter D, under local initiatives and programmatic strategies, it says explore opportunities to restore green space and/or otherwise seek to increase walkable access to outdoor recreation for the affected neighborhoods. And I'm not clear on what the affected neighborhoods are. Do you mean the ones that don't have green space?
Sorry, which letter are you talking about? Oh, D.
Letter D.
It's a good question. We didn't really clarify that. I don't know if you remember why we wrote it that way.
I don't remember, but just looking at it, it would be, I think, those neighborhoods that either lack green space and a walkable access to other outdoor recreation. So those neighborhoods that basically lack those opportunities would be the areas that we would want to see those improvements go to. That's what I interpreted that one to mean.
So can we reword that a little to make it more clear? It could perhaps say, for neighborhoods that lack green space or walkable access to outdoor recreation?
Yes. And I would consider that one a correction, maybe an improvement to that one, and would just replace that one with those corrections.
Also, on letter H, it's very wordy. I'm trying to understand what it means. It says, create customized neighborhood plans that identify neighborhood public improvements and inform regulatory amendments related to design and development standards for new construction, including accessory dwelling units, with the goal of maintaining integrity of the neighborhood. Does this mean assess ways to regulate accessory dwelling units better?
I think it's really dealing more with design. And I think what we could do is maybe separate these into two things. So it's looking at public improvements, which is really should go in our capital improvement section. And then the second piece is, regulatory that would look at design of new construction, how accessory dwelling units, if they're in separate buildings, for example, or even if they're entrances in an existing single family, how that design is, dealt with. I think we could give some more examples here too as well, because I think we're also talking about infill development, like if there's a new home or even another housing option built in an existing neighborhood, to really look very carefully at design and how that fits in with the existing neighborhood context, just in terms of the massing and the architecture, the style, the materials. I think that's what it's getting at more so, and I agree it's not clearly worded.
Do you mean apply design requirements to buildings looking to include or add an accessory dwelling unit?
I think it goes beyond that. It's really looking at design guidelines or development standards that would apply to anything new.
Okay, so I think that's what it should say.
Yeah, I agree.
Thank you for clarifying that. Also, letter K has some strikeouts. I assume that just is going to be deleted.
Correct.
Yeah, okay. And then letter N says, consider a zoning amendment to adopt a public improvement special permit process to offer flexibility in use and/or dimensional requirements for town-owned developments that create public gathering spaces for the Braintree community at large. And what is a public improvement special permit process?
I think this is getting at, and Beverly, maybe you could explain it more, but I think this is getting at looking at some incentive zoning and I actually think this might be wrong about the town-owned developments. Correct me if I'm not understanding this, Beverly, but I think it's really talking about private development and incentivizing different public improvements as part of a private development where you would provide greater density, for example, or other kinds of incentives so that you get, and I think this is actually very similar to the other one that we were looking at.
It is, and can I give an example, or if I may, through the chair? So an example, and maybe the wording here, but one of the examples would be, we have similar language in the Braintree Weymouth Landing District. And one of the examples is the Riverwalk at the 44 Allen Street, and then working with the developer to deed back over about an acre of land, including that Riverwalk, to the town when they're done with the development. So it's part of the development, but it's a public amenity that will be given back to the town as part of that. I don't know if that's a good example, but I think that's what this means.
Yep, this was added by one of our staff, and I do think that's exactly what it means. It means it's kind of reverting, it's going back to that conversation we had earlier about using somehow incentives and sort of relief to get public benefits.
Yep.
Either connections for on public property, access, or just public amenities that the community might want to enhance open space, so it's really about sort of improving public amenities in the public realm, but sort of using incentives to get there. So this is kind of related to some of the others that talk about dimensional relief or relief standards to try and get to some public benefits.
Okay, so it's really important to me that these strategies be described in a very clear and concise way so that residents can understand them when they read them. So I think that's an area where we can edit it to make it say what you're telling me it means. I think it's related to mitigation, but it's more like asking for things that are not necessarily related to the impact, but just things that the community needs that we can get from the developer.
If I may, but they're tied. For example, in the landing, it's you can get a special permit to increase the number of units by providing public amenities. So it's maybe we could wordsmith it a little bit, but that's essentially what it is. And we have that in our zoning now. So we could add it to other districts. But that's exactly what the Braintree Weymouth Landing zoning says.
Okay.
If you do A, B, and C, you can get a special permit to increase this. Height's one of them, density's one of them, setbacks. There's a lot of things that are tied to that.
then perhaps we can add an example
Yeah.
so that people can understand that?
Yeah.
Okay. And then letter V, it talks about a neighborhood plan, and you reference neighborhood plans in a few places in the document, and I'm just not 100% clear on what a neighborhood plan is. It says, identify neighborhood planning areas and identify a short and long-range schedule for neighborhood planning initiatives supported by staff and neighborhood resident communities. Neighborhood plans should address neighborhood issues and concerns and include recommendations for public improvements. I mean, I think I've seen this in play in Braintree with like traffic calming. But what does a good neighborhood plan look like, and what's the process that you use to get there?
So there was an example provided. Some communities that have strong concerns for neighborhood integrity, or there's something special about something unique and different about each of the neighborhoods, and a lot of interest in preserving that area, a lot of active citizens really will engage in neighborhood planning. It's a different level of planning, but a lot of jurisdictions sort of start the neighborhood planning effort. Usually staff supports it, and there's usually neighborhood committees where they essentially develop their own little neighborhood plans, and they work with and they present those to council. And sometimes they make recommendations for improvements, they address concerns they have. In this case, it could also be used to inform, we talked about sort of introducing different, maybe accessory dwelling units or other things within the neighborhoods, but they could also express sort of if they did want those and how they would like those to look and be integrated into their community. In addition to the public improvements they feel like they need, sidewalk, any kind of sidewalk repairs. So it's really to address a whole level of issue at the neighborhood planning level. They're staff supported. They usually have small plans that are attached to them, and the staff work with them to develop those and present those to council. In turn, council, selectmen or the town council considers those in sort of funding options, and maybe works on those along with the staff member and those committee members. So it can be a big lift, and so it would really require some time and staff dedication. So I would say that it's usually sort of a longer term goal, and you might want to adapt a schedule for doing neighborhood by neighborhood, and then you have to update it. And so it is kind of a big lift, but I know there's a lot of concern about neighborhood integrity and preserving neighborhoods and improving neighborhoods, a lot of concern about open space in neighborhoods. This is a way at a very granular level for the community to become empowered to sort of articulate what the neighborhood needs are.
Okay, well, now that I understand what it really is, I think residents would tremendously appreciate that. So thank you. Those are my questions and comments.
Denver.
Okay, so for G, implement strategy for workforce housing production. You have C, economic development study strategies. Of course, can you add an example here? Is that possible? All right, thanks.
Sure.
That's it.
Okay. Okay, so A, explore the acquisition of wooded areas in residential neighborhoods to preserve buffers from incompatible uses. I would like to add in an increased buffer size between incompatible land uses or uses of different zones. And I think it's C. I just would seek opportunities to acquire underdeveloped and vacant parcels for purpose or of affordable workforce housing, work with housing authority and affordable housing developers. And I add in from the vision statement that are compatibly scaled projects and provide additional buffers for incompatible land uses. And then I would just say, again, add in neighborhoods that abut potential developments must be protected, because this was common throughout the entire vision statement, through increased neighborhood buffers, limited public access to already established neighborhoods, size and scale considerations that do not detract from an already established neighborhood. And that's it.
All set? Enhance the municipal impact mitigation standards across all development applications before either the planning board or ZBA. I think we have a good base. I think the example that was cited by Director Santucci Rossi was spot on as far as Burlington. It doesn't hurt us to push the envelope on that, if you will. That's all I have. Thank you.
Raina?
Thank you. So I had a couple things. On K, which is consider community-supported refinement zoning, at the end it says, refinement should recognize reality of parcel sizes and site access. I'd like to expand that a little bit, and location among other factors. I think we could. I have a question, but I might have answered it. In O, we were talking about small-scale housing, ADU, is that accessory dwelling unit? What is
Yes.
that? Could you just
Accessory dwelling unit, spell it out, yeah.
Yeah,
Sure.
it's in one of the other ones, but when I first saw that, I was like, what's an ADU, ADU, ADU? And so I just, and then I have, it's kind of an overall comment. There's a lot of little things in here. We say study, veterans housing, and study, little pieces. And maybe like you did with parking, maybe we say study housing and kind of list them all together and maybe even expand a little bit. And I'm kind of wondering also, maybe this calls out for a bigger housing study. I know that's very vague, but, we started by looking at, in your initial existing conditions with some of the stock and the residents, and, maybe we need to take that the next step, in terms of demand, and how do we work in all these other kinds of housing that we think we want to do, and accessibility, and I guess I just call it a bigger housing study that knits some of these things, that we look at it in a more holistic way. That's all my comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Liz?
Hi, okay. I would like to go to O, encourage more small-scale housing options and create opportunities for multi-generational housing by allowing attached and detached accessory dwellings by right in residence A and B districts. I would like to have by right in residence A and B districts stricken from that, because this is weakening the zoning in the residential neighborhoods by doing this. Melissa?
Just a point of information, you can do an in-law right now on your house with a building permit, and that's been happening for, I don't know how long.
You can do detached as well?
Not detached.
Okay, well, this
Yeah.
says detached.
I know, I said in-law, which means inside the structure.
Well, then let's remove detached, because this means that we could increase the density of residence A and B neighborhoods by 50%. So I think, we're getting away again from the information that we have from the residents about what they want the town to look like and the way they want to see their residential neighborhoods protected. So they don't want added density, so I would really like to see that stricken from that. And when we talked about small-scale housing options, people were referring more to starter homes, not to adding additional houses onto existing housing lots. So I think that needs to be modified to...
Liz, can I just ask, so are you suggesting to add a different alternative O that just says continue to allow the attached accessory dwelling units?
No, I think we just leave that off. If it's there, it's there. But I think we need to remove the detached units and maybe encourage more small-scale housing options for development on undeveloped parcels rather than on already developed neighborhood lots.
Okay, so let me offer two suggestions. So one, I know we're not making judgments on these today. We can do edits for clarification, or we can add new ideas. What if we added one that talked about the infill idea that you just had? Look to encourage small-scale housing options on existing vacant parcels.
Okay.
And then that would be
fine.
added. Yep.
But I think when you have certain things that directly impact a residential neighborhood, and I believe that this does, I think it needs to be removed.
So this is what the pros and cons discussion will be all about. When you are looking to what to do with your short list, that's when we're going to start to remove stuff.
Okay, just for the record, I don't think that's right. I think when something is blatantly against what we have looked into, I don't think it should be there in the first place, but okay. And then I would also like to add, because the MBTA housing is something that the town is definitely going to have to examine, and that was in our vision statement, carefully consider. So I think I would like to add a list of questions to be added that the town look into and have studies done to help them understand and make the right decisions when and if this type of policy is adopted. I would like there to be the following types of questions. What type of funding is guaranteed per year to the cities and towns that comply with the MBTA housing requirements? What safeguards exist to protect the town when the infrastructure is unable to handle this level of development? That's question number 2. Number 3, how will the state fund these grants to the various cities and towns? Number 4, is there enough state money to support funding for all of the cities and towns who comply with this program? Next question, can the zoning changes that have been done to comply with this program be done in phases to make sure that it is viable and beneficial to the town? So I would like those types of questions to be added.
Okay, I'm just trying to follow along. So you're saying to add a strategy to ask those questions when you're
Yes,
considering?
maybe to have
Okay.
a study done.
So
I think
we
those
didn't-
are questions that need to go
Yeah,
in.
we didn't make this very clear when we wrote this, but the town's required to comply by the end of this calendar year, and this plan will basically be done around the same time. So it's really not even going to be in the plan. You guys are going to decide that outside of this planning effort for the master plan. You're going to decide that in a whole nother forum.
Okay, so if that's the case, why did we include it in our
That's why I
vision
said, I think we
statement?
made a mistake including that, because it's going to be decided one way or the
So
other.
it shouldn't be in the vision statement?
I think
then?
we can still talk about, transit, development near transit, but I don't think we have to cite the MBTA zoning requirements.
Well, it
'Cause
is
you're
what
gonna-
it is.
Yeah, I mean, you're gonna make a
You're not
decision-
calling it what it is, but,
You're going to make a decision on that one way or the other, regardless of,
okay.
what this
So
plan
I just
says.
don't understand why we included it in our vision statement, if
I
that's the
think
case.
I made a mistake by adding
Okay.
MBTA compliance, because you're going to be, that ship will have sailed by the time
Okay.
you
All right,
finish this plan.
very good. Thank you, that's it for
Okay.
me.
Justine?
Okay, I'm looking at things from the environmental perspective. Can you explain what's dark sky ordinance? How would that apply to Braintree?
Which one is it? I'm sorry. Oh, dark
Dark
sky.
sky, L. Like, how would that work with the special permit?
So if you give me a second, just a moment, I have some notes on that. I have some very specific compliance recommendations. So essentially, dark sky recommendations are ways to help reduce the impact of light pollution. And there's a whole, I think, a host of regulatory options that we can adopt that help sort of reduce the impacts of light into the night sky. So some of those have a list here include lighting zones, for different land use types or different districts. You might have, what is the minimum requirement in terms of off-site impacts of the lights. Also, different types of light shields in different areas that have make sure that the light does not sort of escape anywhere beyond the property. So there's a whole host of regulations that can be introduced for a jurisdiction to reduce the impact of glare and sort of and mitigate the impact of, I think, light off the property. So I don't know if Juliet has a more specific recommendation. There is a dark sky organization that has recommendations and model ordinances and sort of ideas that the town can consider.
Second questions. I was interested, you're talking about in M, you're talking about multi-storage development property to serve as a noise shield. Being in Berlin for twice, I don't know if that will apply to town of Braintree or not. I would like to say, change that, instead multi-storage development would be a green wall and tree coverage. Because if you're looking at Braintree, there's no way that where we still have space to stack a multi-storage building in between the residents and highway. Number Q, what is employment districts? How is employment districts being identified?
I don't think we were really clear about what that was. I think we interpreted that to mean commercial, industrial areas where people, essentially, jobs are concentrated.
I was just going to say, if I may, through the chair, I would describe Granite Street, the full length of Granite Street is one. You have Braintree Hill Office Park, Wood Road is off of that, South Shore Place, Forbes Road, into Brooks Road. So all along, I would describe the Granite Street corridor as one of those. There's a lot of employment in that area from all the way, from Quincy Line to Randolph Line. All kinds of jobs.
Okay, so,
office jobs, industrial jobs, all different kinds.
But it's not going to add it into our zoning district perspective, right? It's just a description of that area, right?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
Yeah, it's not related to a zoning district. It's related to what uses are there. Mhm.
Okay, because it's brand new for me to see here.
Oh, yeah, it's not okay. It's not a type of zoning district, no.
Okay. One last question, X. It says when develop housing regulations, including different range of community member, does that mean when we are trying to change our zoning and regulation, public comments is important, or how would, what
We
does it
didn't
mean?
clarify exactly how that would happen. I think we can look at different models if the town wants to look at, how are you doing development review now? And are there ways that you can include community members in a more direct way? So it's not maintaining the status quo. The idea is to, work with community members when you're looking at zoning changes and other things. We also just mentioned policy and programs, but the idea is to really include community members in a deeper way than I think is kind of the norm in most communities. I'm not calling Braintree out. I'm just saying that's not the norm in most communities. And I think what we heard is that you want to be included, community members to be included in these decisions before it gets to just a regular public comment process.
Yeah.
And we can clarify that because I don't think this really says that exactly.
Right, I just want to make sure it's not the, different range of community member who has to hold an office. That's all I have, thank you.
Do you want to skip the summary and go on?
Yeah, is that okay?
Okay, that's
All
fine.
right.
Okay.
I kind of regret establishing that as our.
Round
all right.
it, round it.
Okay,
One
so
more
now
round.
the capital improvement strategies, and we're skipping the presentations too, so we'll just go around, yeah.
So we're on core theme 5, Peter, if you want to start.
Yep, on core theme 5, just a quick comment on paragraph N. I just don't understand why that is such an important item, and maybe it should be added as a bullet item to LL. I don't remember that ever coming out of the survey, like digitizing Bell documents? What are we talking about?
I actually think,
Oh, using Bell to do
yeah,
it?
it shouldn't say all Bell documents, it should say using Beld as a resource to digitize town documents. I'm sorry.
Okay.
That should say town documents.
Okay,
I
that makes a lot more
apologize.
sense.
Yeah. This way, all the departments and their documents are sort of digitized and archived and stored in a very consistent manner.
Okay.
Sorry.
Nope, thank you. And that's it.
I'm thinking that this might be an area to address that hasn't come up, but for a while I've always thought that gentrification was taking place in Boston and forcing people from the city into the suburbs. And I'm wondering if you folks have, in the process of doing your work, observed that Braintree is going through some form of gentrification that's consistent with what we've seen in the big cities all over the country for the last 30 years or so.
I guess I can answer that just off my cuff. I don't think that's, I don't see that. I see that your median income is actually lower than the area median income. I don't see that you're gentrifying. You may be gaining residents who are displaced. That's a potential. But I don't see that you're gentrifying. I don't know if others on the team disagree with that.
That's what I expected you to tell me, but I'm just wondering, because of all this concern about the impact of development on the town, is it because people are going to be forced out of the town? And if it's not, if you haven't seen it, that's fine, but I was just curious, because it seems like there's so much fear for development in the town. And I saw it in Boston, where whole neighborhoods changed over the course of 30 years, where they were poor, and then they became so affluent that nobody can live there but rich people. And I don't see that happening in Braintree any day in the near future, but I'm just curious because it hasn't been discussed. For purposes of addressing capital improvement strategies, well, I mean, we can talk all we want, but unless we get more state and federal money, we don't have capital improvement strategies. So I think the strategies need to include aggressively seeking more state and federal money to address all the things that go on in the town. I mean, we haven't built schools. We haven't updated public buildings. And we don't have the money to do it. We can't add to our infrastructure or improve our infrastructure the way we might like to if some of the development that might take place in the town actually does take place. We haven't figured out what to do with hazardous waste. I mean, at one point they were talking about putting it at the shipyard, and there was a big fight, and it didn't get put there, but it's there temporarily. And for purposes of capital strategies, I think that should be something that we take into consideration. You know, we're in the process of updating, I think, by our water treatment situation. I know it's been put on hold, but I have a feeling that's a temporary hold. There's a big concern about whether we need to somehow improve our sewer system, especially to deal with development, but it's old anyway, so it might need to be improved even if there was no development. Our water supply has been a question for a long time. And if we can't deal with these major issues ourselves, I don't think we can come up with strategies other than to get more federal and state dollars. And even though I talked about mitigation earlier, the developers aren't going to pay for all of it. They might have to kick in a little bit. But if we want to improve our capital situation, it's going to require more work to get money from other sources than the residents of the town. Because even though we have a low tax rate, if we doubled our tax rate, it still wouldn't pay for the things that we need.
So more aggressive federal and state funding is basically, right?
Yes.
I just want to make sure we get that.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think it should become the public policy of the town.
And if
you're
you all
an
don't,
employee of the town, or if you're an elected representative of the town, part of your job is to advocate to get more state and federal money into the town.
and if it's possible, I'm worried I'm going to lose some of my team members here. Some of them have pretty long drives tonight, including up to New Hampshire. So if it's possible, just given the late hour, to just like give us a little clear direction about what you want changed or added, that would be helpful so I can let these folks go.
That's what I want added.
Okay, got it.
Seek more public funding.
Okay.
Shelley?
I was on the same path as that, just because we're still dreaming, right? Like on some of this, like we're not worried about where the money's coming from.
Correct.
Perfect. So on E, when we're talking about identify the preferred pathway, space needs and deficiency at Braintree High School, I mean, it's just, we just need a new high school. I mean, we need to put something in there. I mean, I know that there's been tons of study done on it. I mean, but really almost anything less than a new high school, I don't think most of the people in the town of Braintree will be happy with. So I'm sure there's grant writers out there to get us the money that we need or something, but we absolutely need one. There was a few things just in different sections, and I thought that maybe we could group them together, but maybe they're put in those sections purposely. Like there was a bunch of stuff about the police, like FF, MM, and OO. I didn't know if they'd serve better being put together, but maybe because they have different titles, that's why they were put separately. But FF in particular, when they talk about the police and fire services to effectively respond to incidents, but we also need to budget in for new hires. But I think that's where the MM comes in. So is that why it was all separated out, or it was specifically done that way? Because I guess my mind works too. It's like police and then all the needs, library and then all the needs, education and then all the needs, but that's just the way my mind works. And then there was some language-based stuff in there. So I guess in my mind works like, let's talk about all the language stuff together instead of underneath all the different strategies. I don't know if that would be clearer to other people reading it. And that's it.
Julia, sorry. Well, I have some very quick things and some longer things. So the first really quick thing is that on letter K, it says continue to address I&I. I think you mean infiltration and inflow, which is usually designated with an I/I. Just, I never would have known that before, but now I can tell you what that means. And then in letter P, it says explore platforms like See, Click, Fix for resident reporting of public works needs, but we have See, Click, Fix. So unless you mean something else,
Sorry.
or you mean improve See, Click, Fix or something.
No.
We have it.
No, we'll take it off.
Okay. And then letter Z, adopt a new local policy to consider 10-year projections for new growth potential, changes in population and employment, and the impacts of climate change for all public facilities and schools. So I love a good plan, that's very, very extensive. And I wonder if the component about climate change should be pulled out and placed over in the section on sustainability. And then you would have a sharper focus on impact, like, you know, its use and impact on the community. Just a thought. And then in letter GG, as facility assessments are completed, utilize a tool such as School Dude. So we have something called Facilities Dude, and I have never used it, but I know that it is designed to help our DPW department track all the needs of the schools, particularly the ones that have been most newly constructed. And I think that might be what you're talking about, but
It is.
it is.
Yeah. When
So
I
we
talked
have
to them,
that.
yeah. They didn't, I may not have asked the question of them when I interviewed them. I didn't hear that. That's why we had included this, but it's
Okay.
good to know that that's there. We can fix that.
And then while we're in the process of identifying funding, I have some things that we should be identifying funding for. I would add, we should identify funding to restore school program cuts that were made during the pandemic. I would add that we should identify funding to replace cuts that were made to the municipal licenses and inspection department. I would add that we should identify funding to improve IT solutions in our schools. And I would add that we should identify funding to improve our senior center to meet the needs of our seniors better.
What was the second thing? Sorry, I know we're all frantically scribbling.
It's,
got it?
it's
License and
the
inspection.
municipal licenses and
Got it.
inspections.
Okay.
I believe the senior center's in here.
It is, it's in there.
Did I overlook some? I apologize. If
That's
I
okay.
overlooked
Be
it,
as strong as you want it. It's maybe-
which letter is it?
Yeah. Hold on. It's down at the bottom.
Yeah.
PP talks about older adults.
Okay, so
Yeah.
I'd like to specifically target the senior center.
Okay. So in PP, just instead of that being more generic, just call it out.
I mean, I don't want to eliminate transportation services.
Yeah. Okay.
That's what I've got.
Thank you. Denver.
I don't have any comments on this one.
I feel bad you got thrown in last minute, right? So, sorry. Yeah. I would like to see that senior center elaborated on. I think it's the best thing we've got going here in town, but it's in a little bit of a dumpy school. And wouldn't it be amazing for these people? Like, I feel like it's the most amazing thing we have going in this town. So, so maybe like look at a new space. But, so one of the themes from the vision statement was ensuring that town officials, including elected and appointed board members and committee members and town employees, are results-oriented, practice transparency, and respect community input. So I would really like to see like a community checkpoint. So I'd like to add something that says like a community checkpoint to gauge how the community is feeling about the transparency of the elected, appointed, and town officials.
I think there was something in there.
Is it in there?
I think it
Yeah,
was.
we tried
Why
to
don't I
capture
see
that.
it?
I just read
It's,
it.
it's letter, we
L.
tried to capture that in L
L.
with the
Okay,
community
hold on.
satisfaction survey.
Conduct an annual. Yeah, and I think, okay. And I think maybe committee members as well. Like planning board and those types of committees. And perhaps even us.
So appointed, appointed and elected
Yes,
leaders?
yes. Okay, and I'm going to hand it back over to Denver.
Is there a way to include reporting so you could report on the performance of some of these initiatives or some of these strategies? Is that included?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry.
Yeah, so as part of the action plan, what we'll be talking about, one of the earlier meetings this year, I think it might have been January, we talked about trying to develop metrics so that you can actually measure how well you're performing against the goals. And if these strategies, whatever you end up adopting, some of them may not work for you the way they want, so you want to be able to pivot. But the only way you'll know if it's working is if you can measure the goal's progress. And so that will be part of your plan in terms of recommendations for types of metrics to include. And then we'll also recommend that the town establishes an implementation committee for the master plan that is tracking. And we usually, you don't have to follow these recommendations, but we usually recommend also that it's a very transparent way to always have kind of a running list on the website. What is the status of every single strategy that gets into the plan? What is the status of your progress toward these metrics? And then have a very regular report out that's public, probably to your town council. I'm not sure what forum exactly. And so that's kind of part of it. I think I'm answering your question, am I?
You
I'm
have.
very tired
Thank
right
you.
now, so I might be rambling.
Thank you.
Okay.
You have.
Okay, good.
Thank you.
Okay, and I'll pass it off.
Thank you. Great ideas already listed, thank you, from the staff. I have one to add, and that would be strengthen the town's capability to increase public safety impact mitigation for East Braintree residents in the Four River Basin industrial area.
Raina?
I don't have anything to add, but I had a similar thought as Shelley, is trying to consolidate and group together things that had to do with budget and funding, and kind of put them together, either list or subcategories. It's easier to see how comprehensive it is.
Yeah, we can look at the way we're organizing it. We may not do that for this round, just because we want to make sure to get the survey out and there's probably, many dozens of ways to organize this information.
Yeah.
But before we come up with the actual plan, once we have the short list, I think that would be something we can talk about. How do you want to really organize the things that you end up with?
Yeah, it just makes it a little easier to review, but I'm
Yeah.
done.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Liz?
I agree with everything everybody has said. Thank you.
Justine?
Okay, sorry, I always have a couple more. For Anne, where you're talking about documentations, century documentation, can we add somewhere to improve communication to residents with newer system, with multiple platforms? I think for us that know how to navigate the town's communication system, we know it, but not most of the town residents. Example, like meeting minutes and media alerts and everything. We sometimes get a call, we sometimes get a letter, so if they don't come into us, they didn't know. So I'm trying to looking for a more uniform communication to residents. For O, identify fund to continue programs that reduce language barriers. I think it should be identify fund to continue program that reduce language barrier and technology barrier for older adults. And also, if I may, add identify fund to support multicultural enrichment. I also want to add, I don't see anywhere we address emergency management. We have it, the town have it, but from what I heard and what I learned based on the East Braintree events, just not up to date. I don't know where we can add it, but would like to add a item on update our current emergency management process and system. It's just that from last event, we just heard things all over the place that there's no single communications and no single platform to look up the procedures. Last, also hearing things around town as a newcomer to the government. One thing I don't know where to add, but as a corporate employee, we all have, performance reviews and review our return on investment. I don't know if there's such thing for all the town department to has a performance metrics to make them countable. So examples, water department. One last thing I would like to see is adding funding to continue support special need program to ensure the town will continue provide all-inclusive program to residents that need. We are all-inclusive special town and want to make sure that for next 10 years we still have funds to support that initiative, and the special need kids continue have that options and opportunities to stay and serve by our town. That's all I have.
Madam Chair?
Thank you.
If I may,
Yes.
very quickly, I had a note that I had written down, and I apologize, I was kind of listening a lot this evening. Under core theme number 1, if it's okay with the committee, I'd like to propose to add for the town to explore a private entity that is a friends group that can hold restrictions on open space in this town. So we have, when we purchase open space with community preservation funds, or we spend any community preservation funds, but particularly for the open space, we have to put restrictions on it, and we have a very difficult time finding people to hold those restrictions, and the town owns the land, so the town cannot actually hold the restriction. So a friends group, a lot of different communities do this, you know, Lincoln, Concord, all these places that have, you know, just, I guess, I don't know, better ways of doing things, I guess. But we need to look at something like that, because we're going to be faced with the inability to properly hold these restrictions in the future, and kind of looking at some of the initiatives that the committee would like to see, especially in regards to purchasing things in residential neighborhoods. I mean, these groups, the Friends of and the trustees, and they're not interested in holding a restriction on 10,000 square feet to make sure there's some open space between a neighborhood and Washington Street. They're looking at large tracts of open space with much broader conservation purposes. So if it's okay with the committee, I'd like to suggest that we explore looking at a Friends of Braintree organization to hold open space restrictions.
Sure. Does anyone have a problem with that? Justine?
But I don't have a problem with that, but I think that could be added to our charter review more.
It wouldn't be town people. It wouldn't be anything to do, it would be residents. It would be like a private nonprofit. Yeah, it wouldn't be part of the charter. It wouldn't be a government function. It needs to be separate from government. That's the whole sort of angle. Or separate from the town.
Thank you. Anything else from planning? No? Okay.
No, thank you,
Okay.
Madam. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, so anything else, Jen, from?
No, that's it for now. So you'll see this survey by Wednesday, and really the idea is just which are the most controversial or most complicated that you really want the input, deep dive input from the technical working session. But nothing's going to be taken off the table at that point. It's just going to be information for you.
Okay. Okay, does anyone want to make a motion to? Oh, hold on.
One last question. So this is it, right? So I have, one of the things that I thought about that I didn't mention was the workforce. And the workforce development, I think it highlighted, and if I'm wrong, then just correct me if I'm wrong, it highlighted life science. But can we expand that for some of the people that, when they do a technical review, they can think about the other, like industries? Can we do that? Okay, all right, that's it. That's all I have.
Okay, and with that, does anyone want to make a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Okay, second? Okay, good night, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.